Lewis always makes me uncomfortable. So
We should just do the Lewis relationship show. There's like a whole show about Lewis and his relationship.
Like it could be everything from like relationship advice to like
Past girlfriends.
past
We
girlfriend.
could have like Joe Camper come on, discuss
What about
it,
fucking-
but like he's not there.
what about
Yeah,
Grace just has the benefit of like 10 years of marriage to like put all of his
we're married
shenanigans.
with kids. What we have going on is quite boring. We're talking about you and what you have going on.
Which is interesting. We'll get into it one of these things. All right,
Yeah, I
welcome
think
to
that's-
Hammer Factor episode
Yeah.
83. We got quite the show lined up for you. We've got an interview coming up with, who I would consider, we have two people on the show on this interview, and I would say both of them are in the top 10 most influential paddlers of all time. Would you say that?
That's a big claim.
That is a big claim.
Let me just think about it for a second. Anyway, I would go there. I would say that they're both on the list or pretty close to
Top
it.
10. Top 10.
Top 10 all time.
Like if you were making a top 10 list, those names would be on it for sure, or they'd be in the contention.
I mean, I feel like they would, for me, I feel like they would both be on it.
Most influential.
Influential.
I have to
Are we
think
allowed
about
to say
that
their
one.
names? Can we say the names yet?
I mean, they're going to be in the title anyway, right? So we might as well.
Yeah, we have Scott Lindgren and Rush Sturgis coming on to talk about all things paddling. They just released a movie, The River Runner, which we had an opportunity to do an advanced screening of. I don't want to get into your guys' thoughts of that right now. We'll talk about it when we get them on the show, but we got to see that. I'm a little too deep. I'd like to introduce my co-host. My name is John Grace. I'm the producer here at the Hammer Factor. I'd like to introduce Louis Geltman, Policy Director for the Outdoor Alliance, and John Weld, co-owner of Immersion Research. It's been a while. What's up? What's been going on?
I've been boating a bunch. Like a lot. I bought a Puffy Steez yesterday.
No way.
Yeah, I took it down Great Falls like 4 laps. And I have a sinus infection that is it's going to kill me, I think. This will be my last show.
How'd you like the puppy Steves?
It's great. It's great. I've been using the OG, so I'm paddling OG a bunch. And the OG, all you want to do in the OG is just boof and skip. That's what that boat wants to do, and that's what you want to let it do. It's not really like a performance machine when it comes to eddy turns and that kind of thing. I just felt like the Steez it just got me more into that arena, which is where I want to go. I want that to be my little white boat this winter, is the Puffy Steez. That's my goal.
I love it. It's such a magic boat out there. It's like almost to the point where like if I'm running something and I can't paddle that boat for whatever reason, it's like diminishes my enthusiasm. And it's so good on the little white.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Aiden came back from world class, fired up to paddle. And he got me out paddling. To his credit. So we've been doing, we did on a Cispus a bunch. We laid treats, like power treat. I power treated so hard on the Cispus last weekend with Geltman. I mean, I hurt my back.
We're like in the eddy below Behemoth, like the big drop on the Cispus, and I'm like, hold on, John, like, did you actually hurt yourself or are you just whinging? And John's like, I'm just whinging, it's fine. I'm like, okay, go on.
I landed so flat, I smelled bananas. I smelled like I had like an olfactory sensation. Well, the thing is, I'm figuring like my kid went to world class and it was however much money it was. And I'm trying to amortize the treats with him. You know what I'm saying? I'm down to like $750 a treat right now. I want to get down to like pennies per treat, where he's just dishing them out. It's just pennies per treat, or they're nothing. They're next to free. But right now, the treats are quite expensive.
So each time he lays a treat, there's like a monetary figure related to that.
Yes. I'm taking it off my balance.
Aiden was looking pretty stylish out there.
Yeah. I know, it's great. It's really exciting.
Has he passed you up yet, John?
I would say, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, you
like,
want to see that as a parent,
you know? When I'm like, who do I have to look out for in this rapid? It's definitely more John than Aiden.
Oh, that tells right there. I like that.
Yeah.
No, so
look out for. What are you talking about?
Oh man.
What about you, Lewis? Last time I saw you, I was crawling out of my van. Oh man, in Idaho. So what have you been up to?
I feel like we need to get into your impressions of the North Fork race, your first time out there. But I'm pretty much just paddling surf ski. Whitewater is the best whitewater in the Columbia Gorge right now is on the Columbia, no doubt.
He said that. First of all, I sold my surf ski, just for the record. And he said that he made that exact same quote in the middle of Sispus, when the Sispus was running, like Sispus season. And I categorically, reject the idea that was the best whitewater in the gorge.
Dude, you're totally wrong. I mean, the Sispus is fun, but it's like, yeah, you're wrong. I don't know what to tell you. It's like when it's really blowing, it's like, I have one, I don't know. It's like imagine like Rocky Island on the Potomac, but the waves are like twice as big, and it's like 15 Rocky Islands like side by side, and you're like paddling up this thing, like surfing up from like one wave to the next for like 7 miles.
I just didn't feel that. I wasn't.
You just didn't get enough time.
I sold my boat to Calhoun. There could not be a better owner for that boat than Calhoun.
Calhoun is gonna get into. He's gonna be fast in like no time flat. Right. He's got the like wild water sprint background. Knows how to use a wing. Doesn't mind grinding. He'll get good quick.
Yeah, I couldn't help but be out there, just look at the kiteboards and be like, that looks more fun.
A race, the Gorge Brown Wind Championships.
Yeah, so how'd it go, Lewis? I saw you like 30th or something up there.
Something like that. It was cool. I don't know. It's fun doing something just like totally different and like feeling like, I feel like I'm like getting better in the surf ski like every time I go, and like I do not really have that sensation paddling whitewater anymore. And I don't know. There was like a good handful of whitewater guys racing, like Jamie Klein's like a longtime West Virginia boater, like lived up in Bellingham for a long time now. Leif Anderson, Austin Kiefer, who won, is former slalom racer and like super badass surf ski paddler now. Hipgrave did well. So I don't know. It's like those are the only guys I really know. So like all I really want to do is just like just battle it out with the other whitewater guys. Really.
So to be clear, I went out one day with Hipgrave before I sold the boat, and Hipgrave shows up, and this is the crowd we're dealing with: full Lycra bodysuit, right? Full body, heart rate monitor, 5-toe socks. Right? That's your crowd. That's your peeps.
I mean, dude, it's not. I'm not like. Look, I have friends. Like, I don't need to make new friends. I just want to like, paddle this boat because it's cool. And like, dude, honestly, the Lycra long sleeve thing after it's like so brutally sunny. It's not like the real river where there's shade. So I'm like, oh man, like I might need one of those. I don't know,
dude.
It's
a conversion, bro.
He's a great guy and an amazing paddler, but that's an outfit. That's an outfit you have to get into.
Yeah, Weld sent me that picture.
You just got to embrace. You just got to let go of your ego, man. Just embrace being a tool bag.
Can we change the conversation to paddle feather for a moment? Should I issue a trigger warning?
Dude, are we not done with this?
We had a very frank discussion about this on the river the other day.
But it was the exact same thing we've been saying on here for...
People just need to cut it out. You need to get a 60-degree offset paddle and stop with it. Thank you. That's it. I'm done. That was my PSA.
All right.
Is it
Grace, what do you think of North Fork?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it was so fun. It was, number one, like, I love the Idaho scene. I can't believe it's been 7 years since I've been out there. So it was really cool just to tap back in. The event was great. We went out there and did a live stream from the event, and that went really well.
Congrats on pulling all that off, by the way, man. I mean, that looked like a huge undertaking.
It is no joke, a huge undertaking. I mean, like, you don't really realize what's going on, but till like I pulled you in the trailer and you're like, holy shit, all that's going on in that little white trailer. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot going on there. But you know, just big hat tip to everybody out there. I mean, James and Regan, they created a beast. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a big difference between putting on a race and putting on an event. You know, and the North Fork is an event. You know, it's like a multi-day event. And, you know, the Voorhees have taken that over, and this was the first year they put it on, and it was, I mean, talk about the hustle, dude. Like, at one point, you know, Alec, it's late in the day. I'm running cables trying to get my stuff set up. Alec is literally limping down the road, trying to move road cones, blood spilling out of his leg from like falling out of the back of a truck earlier, trying to get all the stuff done. That morning before the race, Mike is running up and down the road, the ramps coming together, and at one point he's sitting there and he's talking to James, and he's like, dude, it's like 2 hours before the start of the race. He's like, dude, we're not going to get this done. And James looks right at him. He's like, no, dude, we're right on time. And it was just like, you know, just, I mean, I love that hustle and like the pressure of getting it done, you know, all right on time. And it was sick. It was awesome to see, you know. There were some things that like kind of blew me away. I always, looking at that event, was jealous that it was roadside, that there wasn't the logistics of having to get everything down in a big canyon and whatnot. But when I was there, it presented a whole new list of challenges, from dealing with traffic and the road closures and that whole permitting process. And there's all kinds of behind the scenes stuff I could go on about that. But it was rad. I had a great time. It was just really cool. I mean, the course was awesome. It was set up. There was it was good competition. I gotta say, I gotta give a big hat tip to Sage, who was on the last show. You know, she was out there at sunup when I was there doing practice laps when nobody else was around. You could tell she was fully zenning in on it and wanting to make it happen. You know, Dane, he's just on such an insane level right now. You know, it's like you just watch him and you're like, the level of consistency is just, you know, it's hard to match. Although Alec did give him a run for his money in that one run, but it was sick, man. It was sick. I partied a little too hard on Saturday night, but I guess that's kind of the issue. I mean, kind of the standard there. I know that, and Weld, thanks for letting us borrow that generator because we did need it. But I know that Lewis, my text blows up, you know, Sunday morning. I'm definitely in kind of a broken state, and it's just going off, and I like wake myself up in the van, and I'm like texting Lewis. I'm like, yeah, this is where I'm at. You can come get the generator. But he's like, all right, you know, we're getting ready for a North Fork lap. And like no sooner than I can put my phone down, like I look out the window and there's Lewis, like right outside the door. And I'm like, all right, I got to take a step back here, or I'm going to get myself lost. But it was good, man. I had a great experience. Live show was kick ass. It was, you know, there's angles and shots and ways of viewing the river that you never could without what we had going on out there. So it was sick. It was sick. You can still watch it. I'll put a link in the show notes to where you can check it out.
Are there show notes? There's really show notes?
Yeah, there's always great show notes.
Someone was questioning the existence of the show notes in one of the emails.
Well, you know, they could be a little bit more elaborate, but the relevant information is there. So, but it was sick. Lewis, you think you're ever going to get back out there and race that thing again?
I don't know, man. I think I might be done. I'm just
it's mostly flat water from here on out, I think, for Gelman.
I mean, judging from the previous conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the end of your shoulder, by the way.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, the RPMs you're doing out there is pretty substantial.
It still hurts from that race. But
yeah. You got a wing, too, right?
Yeah.
Which is magnifying the torque on your shoulder, you know, by threefold.
I think I just need to work on my technique with the wing a little bit and maybe get another shoulder surgery.
Or that.
Yeah, the North Fork was cool. It was good to it was interesting. Like, did we lose Grace? You still there?
Yeah, I'm
No.
here. No, I'm here.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. It was interesting after, like after a year off, and a lot of the international folks not able to travel. It seemed like, like to me, the men's field didn't seem quite as deep as it has in the past. Like there were a lot of notable people missing to me. And then also a lot of, younger paddlers who were like in there and fired up. And it was, I don't know, it felt like the torch had really been passed. Like, after James and Regan passed the event on to the Voorhees and there was a year off. And it felt like a new North Fork in a way. But yeah, like Dane, just always impressive. It was really cool to see Alec get on the box. I mean, I think nobody is more motivated to win that race than he is, and it was just, I feel like every year he like looks really fast and isn't quite able to like put it together in the final the way he would want to, and it was good to see him finally have a really good run. That was sweet to see. And Jeremy Nash on the box too was seeing the next generation out there, and he had a really impressive run. But then even more than all that, I mean, it was just really cool to see the women's class like really like coming into its own, like to like really be like, okay, we're gonna have a full 5-person women's class, and seeing like 30 plus women racing in the qualifier, and like a good competitive final. I think the only thing that was really missing for me is like it would have been like I just really wanted to see like the women's winner make all the gates, and it was just like kind of a bummer that didn't happen. But like obviously, like it was right on the cusp, right? I mean, it's not like Sage hadn't been making all the gates or like Natalie hadn't been making all the gates, and seeing Darby put down a good run was sick, and like it's just I don't know, it's just cool to see the progression there.
Yeah, and dude, in the practice, man, like Holt McWhirk was looking really good in some practice runs. Dude, I got to give it up for your boy Max Blackburn, squeaking in there, dude. I was calling it the whole time. I was like, dude, you got it. And he sends me a text when he made it through, and he was like, I blame you for this, Grace. I was like,
yeah, he was really hoping not to make the finals.
Yeah, but he did well. I mean, he looked good. There were a lot of people, and that international field will come back. It was like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
That has nothing
It's just
to do.
this year, yeah.
And I want to give one more shout out. I'm sorry before we to Natalie Anderson, who donated her prize money, which I thought was a really cool cause to some women athletes out there. I don't know. Go on, Lewis. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna tell the Max story about Max and I 2 years ago. It was like pretty high water, and we both made it through into the semis and thought that we'd made it into the final, like because it was that head-to-head business, and it was Max versus Tyler and me versus Mike Dawson, and Tyler was like, I think I made some mistakes, and Dawson was like, I think you got me, bro. And me and Max are just like walking around at the park and crouch with like our head in our hands, just being like, I don't want to race the final, like this. And then they announced the results, and neither of us made it in, and we were like the two happiest losers ever. We were just like straight to the bar.
No, tomorrow's the Upper Yacht race. 100 people once again, over 100 people.
Sick, dude.
I just want to slip that in before it get too late here.
Are you racing?
I probably, yeah. Why not?
What are you gonna
Kara's
race?
up there. Kara's there right now, getting everything organized. She did a run today with Aiden.
So is Aiden racing
tomorrow? I think so. Yeah.
Is Kara racing?
I don't know. She's probably timing, and she may do a timed lap when she gets done or something. She has a boat. Like I know she has a boat for it.
What boat are you gonna race?
Whatever I can find.
So
you have a quiver of like wildwater boats and like old Phoenixes and like.
Well, Kara has the good Phoenix. I'm not really trained up for a wildwater run. I need a little more practice before I take my DR boat down that thing.
You've been paddling a surf ski, dude.
Composite coffin right now. What's that?
You've been paddling a surf ski.
Yeah.
So who's going to win between you and Aiden? That's the big question.
Depends on the boat, but if we have comparable boats, I'll take Aiden, no problem.
You got a little more grind. You get a little more grind left in you. You know what I mean?
I know. Despite what Lewis thinks in terms of me needing some help down the river, like a geriatric old man, I still have a few tricks on my sleeve.
Well, let's transition from there. Lewis, do you have any policy updates, real quick, before we move to our guests? That I'm very excited for this interview with Mr. Scott Lindgren and Mr. Rush Sturgis. What is going on the Outdoor Alliance policy front?
We're hiring. If you would like to be
what's my starting salary?
If you'd like to be a communications associate or a policy associate, we have job applications up on the site right now. I think the range we put down for those jobs was 45 to 58. So yeah, if you want to come on.
What's the vacation look like and benefits?
Oh, benefits are good.
Paternity leave?
Yup. Rental leave, health insurance, vacation. I'm not sure what the starting vacation is, but it's good. We get one Friday off every month. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good place to work.
Does this person
work directly with you? Are you like their boss?
This person would work directly for me, which is a scary place to put yourself into.
Okay, so this is like your henchman. You're like,
I'm actually gonna pull my application with that in mind.
Lots of people just stop typing.
The description should be Lewis's henchman.
Yeah, that could be. We worked in there.
Okay.
We get a T-shirt made. Whoever gets the job gets a T-shirt.
Could do that. It's some sort of hazing operation.
They have to do. They have to sit in for you on a show.
So they have to listen to you talk about how great flatwater paddling is.
It's like out of gotta sit in on the camera factor. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be cool. I'm excited that we're growing and kind of building out our program and getting more people in the game, and hopefully gonna be able to kind of expand what we can do. And Will has had to mute himself. He's laughing so hysterically right now.
I'm just picturing you and your assistant like in matching full body Lycra suits in your house there, getting ready to go paddling.
That's just the progression. If you get to start off and get rad for, if you're starting in your 20s, you got another 15 years of getting rad before you move into the old man sports. Someday, John, you're gonna. I still can't believe that. I thought we had you, man. I thought it had all the things you needed. It's like
we went one day, and you were like, "Wasn't that great?" That was like you sort of said it was like as good as it gets, or you get one day like that every year or so.
What?
That's what you said that day we went, and you guys at the end were like, "Yeah, you get days like this like every once a summer or twice a summer." And I was like, And you just go from the same place. You put in a drain of lake and you paddle to the mouth of the white salmon, right? That's what we do.
I
mean, that's what I've been doing. I mean, there's more to do.
Listen, it's fine. I get it. I totally get it. You know what I mean? I bought a boat. I mean, I was interested enough.
You gave her.
But it's just not my thing.
Guys,
I feel like it's like
we can't talk about this
dynamic
anymore.
Of environment.
It's just not interesting. This is just not.
I know. We need another podcast. We need to do another podcast that's just for flatwater people. Like you and Hipgrave can compare like heart rate.
It's the future. We're gonna ask Rush about it. Rush just got out in the surf ski a couple days ago.
I got 3 killer bumps, man, back to back.
Yeah.
All right, I got to switch into producer mode here. Can one of you guys take over and introduce? We've had Rush on the show, so I'm not sure he needs as much of an introduction to our audience. But
does Rush need an introduction?
I don't know. You tell me.
He's a guest who needs an introduction.
I think something interesting about having, I feel like Grace and Lindgren, at least in my own experience, were sort of like they're really two key links in like the popularization of kayaking in California,
No question.
Like,
I mean, from my perspective, no question.
Yeah, like I feel like there was like the Chuck Stanley, Lars Holbeck generation.
Yeah.
And then, again, just as like a total outsider, and then like the next thing you hear about is, Scott and his generation really pushing things. And then, Grace, it seemed like really just like brought that to the East Coast to the point that it's like, all of a sudden that's like the kayaking trip that you go on if you're staying in the United States,
For sure. Like I remember growing up, like this before, I mean, this is way back for the internet in the 90s or whatever. And we thought like California was like some kind of dancer doing Burning Man off a waterfall. We were like wearing gloves or something. We're like, why would we? And we had no idea. I mean, we had, just no clue what was going on out there. And then it was like Daniel, who was like, no, you don't understand. There's a whole, that's where it's at, Anyway, we're just going to go ahead and talk over you, Scott. We'll fill in the You just nod your head every once in a while.
Yeah, I kind of want to apologize to everybody in California for all of that hype about California kayaking. So.
Oh man, it's amazing. Even with all the hype, it's still a ghost town out here, bud. I mean, we go kayaking all the time, and nobody's on the river. Actually, the other day was pretty unbelievable. 2 days ago on Cherry Creek, there were 35 people on the river, that's unheard of. That's insane. So, yeah, it's still not much has changed, man. The paddling community here is still, especially on the harder stuff, is still pretty small. Feels still pretty small.
You don't feel like there's a wave of like East Coast or just boaters in general going out there to prove themselves out there? That's like a thing now.
I mean, obviously, when the High Sierra stuff comes in, you get those crews that come in and do the High Sierra stuff, but like the low-hanging fruit stuff, you just don't see it as much. Like, the South Yuba, or the Upper Middle Consumnes, or even Yuba Gap, or, like all that other stuff, Silver Fork, Golden Gate, all that stuff, it's just ghost town. There's like 10 of us in the neighborhood, and that's it. I mean, yeah, it's pretty, obviously Upper Cherry Creek and Middle Kings and San Joaquin doesn't get done that much. Fantasy Falls, Royal Gorge. I mean, even the Royal Gorge this last year, I think there was a handful of teams just because of the window. The window was only like, I don't know, maybe 4 days.
I mean, you would think just because it was so short, you'd have even more people packed in there. But why? I mean, why is it? Like, what is it about that that's keeping groups out there, do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know. It's granite, clean water, High Sierras. Yeah. I don't know of another. I feel like I've searched far and wide to find a better place to go kayaking when the season's in, and man, this place is just nothing really.
Let me know when you find it.
Yeah, right. I actually saw an image somewhere in China that actually had like, one of the things I used to do, especially in the High Sierra, and this is actually how I found Upper Cherry Creek, was I used to jump on the topos, and I used to just look for granite. Like wherever there was granite. Once I figured out that was the geology of choice, and I just started like going everywhere looking for it. And actually the biggest strain of granite in California starts on the north stand and goes all the way through Cherry Creek. And it's like one big slab if you look on a topo. And I was like, okay, we'll just start here and move south. And so, yeah, I just think granite makes the best rivers in the world, and spent a good percentage of my life looking at maps trying to find granite gorges.
Well, I think, Rush, can you hear us?
Yeah. Got you guys. Can you hear me?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, loud and clear. All right, well, we got our panel here.
It's nice to see everybody.
Yeah.
It's been a hot minute, John.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
Well, big
Lewis,
thanks for coming on the show, guys.
Or maybe we've met a few times over the years.
Yeah, cross paths briefly, I think. But
yeah.
No quality time yet.
Well, thanks for having us on. Super grateful. I know that John and John have both been pushing us to try to make this happen sooner than later. And so, yeah, just super grateful to be here and finally make this happen.
For sure. You can't have a kayaking show without you on it.
Oh, man.
Well, I'm going to crack my first beer here of the show. You know, now that we got
nice.
everybody
There you
on,
go.
so we can get into it. So real quick, Scott, we got to get to the obvious. What's your paddle length and feather?
Oh, this is so funny. Paddle length is it goes between 197 and 200 and 30-degree offset. About 2 years ago, Annual was pushing me to go to 45. Benny pushed me to 65. I dabbled and started missing rolls, and then realized that I'd been at 30 degrees for the better part of my life, and why would I try to fix something that isn't broken? And promptly went back to 30 degrees and got my shitty roll back.
If there is one negative to the high degree feather, it does get tricky to roll on your offside.
Oh, even like the back deck for me, I was copping back deck rolls, and my roll is terrible enough as it is, and then to throw the offset in there, and I get it, you know, like a lot of the kids were like, you know, you paddle too low, you know, bring your, you know, go more vertical, and so I really tried to like work on that, and actually Annual gave me the best advice. He's like, dude, just put your paddle as close to the bow of the boat as you can, and I was like, okay. And then all of a sudden it started to look a little cooler, and then, you know, the rest is kind of history. But man, you just get those old school habits, and then trying to break out of them is savage. And then, you know, you throw an offset in there, and then you start missing rolls, and then your ego gets involved, and then boom, you're right back to what you know.
Next time you're in town, Scott, we'll do a little roll practice, man. We'll
Jeez, man.
I can video or something. We could
Yeah,
do
I'd show up for that.
Yeah, I like think about that often. Yeah.
So let's just get right into it. You guys got a movie that is coming out very soon. Man, I could go into my thoughts. We talked a little bit earlier that we got a pre-screening. But Rush, can I just turn it?
What we give Scott a little bit of an introduction? I feel like everybody should know who Scott is, but probably does not. Do not.
Well, Scott Lindgren is one of the most influential people. I mean, I said it earlier, is the top 10 list of most influential paddlers that has ever lived. Big inspiration to me, someone who's been paddling a long time and been to all kinds of places, fully took film production to a much bigger level, and really put kayaking in front of more eyeballs than probably anybody I know. From, you know, NBC Sports all the way through to the most core kayaking VHS DVD over the years. So I have a lot of positive things to say about Scott. But, you know, I think in summary, you know, definitely one of the most influential whitewater kayakers to ever live, both filmmaking and expeditionary style. So that's where I would go with that.
I'd make the argument that Rush is probably the most influential paddler in the world.
Well, see, this is interesting because we talked about this earlier.
Yeah, I don't know. I appreciate that, John. Super grateful for your words, man. And I should emphasize that this is Rush's film, and I just happen to be in it. So, yeah.
Rush,
the film? The film is really more. It's more about me. No, it's this is I mean, everything you just said, Grace. I mean, I grew up watching Scott's movies. You know, like from a young age. That was those were the films that inspired me the most. I mean, I had, you know, all of them on VHS, and that's what I would just watch on repeat over and over. And actually, you know, the backstory on this is that I was actually kind of trying to get this film going as far back as 2012. I wanted to make a movie called California Kayak. That was kind of like the original kind of dream, was, you know, something that just kind of chronicled a little bit of the history in California. And I feel like in whitewater, we don't always do the best job of kind of remembering some of the folks that came before us and just kind of keeping good track of some of the more influential people in the sport. I think it's honestly done a lot better in other sports like climbing, mountaineering, skiing, etc. And we have a little bit of it, but I think we need more so that we can kind of preserve some of those stories. But I couldn't get that project off the ground, and it was going to kind of be centered around Scott, and I kind of just put it to rest. And then it wasn't until we actually did the Middle Kings together in 2016, and I started like learning a little bit more about kind of what Scott had been going through, and some of his ups and downs and such, and that kind of over the course of a year or two kind of turned into what the River Runner is now, and that was honestly thanks to Scott being open with his story, and also me getting the invite to the Indus from Aniol. Shout out to him for that. And the rest is kind of what the River Runner has become.
So this project in your mind started in 2012, but you guys first talked about it in 16.
We actually talked about it back then. I had a proposal and everything put together for a California kayak film, with Scott as kind of the centerpiece of it, but I wanted it to be more historical. And in fact, even the River Runner was initially kind of more focused around the history of paddling. In fact, that's honestly probably one of the things I not regret, but I sort of lament a little bit that we had to lose a lot of that history in the film, because it really ultimately became a biography project about Scott, and that was just it just kind of is what it is. But there's a lot of people we interviewed that are amazing paddlers that I wish would have made the final cut. But it just didn't quite fit this story.
Well, that project's open.
Yeah, the other thing too that was pretty interesting when we set off for the Indus, initially Rush and I were like, man, let's do like a 10-minute YouTube video, and that's basically what it started out as, is a 10-minute YouTube video. And then we came back and Rush cut like a 5-minute or 6-minute piece from the Indus, and on the Indus and on the Middle Kings and on several other occasions, I just got comfortable with talking about everything. And he's like, man, maybe we should try to make a feature. And we sent the initial proposal out. What did we send it out to, like 50 different people or something like that, Rush? I forget, but we sent the thing out to like everybody. We had an agent that was helping us out, and we were shot down pretty much by everybody to make the film. And then we fortunately were able to find a couple different folks that stepped up and gave us an initial sort of get the thing off the ground and get an edit. And then if the thing had legs, we would maybe be able to have access to more money. And so we did that first cut, and then the folks that were behind it were psyched on what they saw. And so yeah, it just went from there. And man, 3.5 years later, it's like, wow, we're finally releasing this thing. I know Rush has got to be sick of me at this point. I call him all the time and ask him if he's still
over it. I'm pretty fucking over it.
Because God, I can only imagine. Yeah, just the effort that went into it is just so over the top. It's man, there needs to be a film about that, to be honest.
Well, I think Weld and I were talking, and we could see, we both commented on how much effort went into this project. Like it shows, Rush. So just so you know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
yeah.
Gelman and I sat down to watch it with a couple other people. My 6-year-old was there, and this was on Monday. And it's a kayaking movie, so I mean that's what I initially think. I'm like, well, I'll have like a magazine ready, just because I see my share of kayaking movies. And then my kid was like, who's a boater, he was like, well, I'll start washing dishes and I'll keep checking in, right? So the movie started, and my kid sat down next to me, and we watched it beginning to end without. I mean, we were, our attention was captured the entire length of the movie. Now, there's a bunch of reasons for that. It's a great story. I knew a bunch of the people in it. The production value was amazing. And just before you make any judgments about it, I have to say that anybody who's putting as much energy and time and thought into kayaking and paddle sports deserves a shout out. I mean, that's going to help our sport, in so many ways. So, but having said that, I mean, obviously you went from a YouTube video to this movie. I mean, so after the movie, we sat down, we're trying to figure out, like, how did he tangle this thing? Like, what made this different? I mean, in your mind, like, what were the plot lines you brought together, or the story, or what's the message you felt like you were hanging on to as you put this narrative together?
Yeah, thanks for that. No, I appreciate that. And yeah, I feel like hopefully even if people hate it, they'll at least be able to see that a lot of work went into it. I mean, I think for sure this like film definitely pushed me as a filmmaker. It was it went from more of a sort of historical kayak movie to more of a biography film, which is way different than anything I'd ever done. And I think at its core, it's definitely a human story. I think that this is different than a lot of what's out there in the adventure sports arena, and it's ultimately Scott's story and his willingness to talk about some of his challenges and what he's been through and how he's arrived at where he's at. I think it's ultimately a story about healing, which is not necessarily a destination, but it's a process. It's something Scott's still dealing with. This isn't like a story of somebody who's like perfect. No one is, but it's a story about somebody who got better, and it's about that process, so without kind of giving away too much of the film, I think, at its core, it's like if you go into this expecting the next epic shred flick, you're going to be disappointed. And I know that kayakers out there probably will be, but if you go into it with, a different mindset and just a little more openness to, learning a little bit about someone and their story, then you might enjoy it.
Now, something I want to say before we get too deep into this interview is, like, Rush, Scott, at any point, if you feel like we're giving away too much of the film, just be like, you just got to watch it to get that answer or something like that. Like, feel fully free to do that. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want to push too far, which sometimes is easy for me to do. So just want to throw that out there before we get going.
I mean, one of the reasons I found this movie to be interesting was because Scott, I don't know you that well, but you're a difficult character, I mean, you're a tough guy to know, and you're not the most successful kayaker. I mean, back in the day when you were really charging hard, I mean, you were somebody that I was kind of intimidated to approach, you know what I mean? That was, how you make a movie about someone like that is something that was interesting to me for sure. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Grace, do you think I'm way off in that assessment, or?
No, I don't know that you're way off. I've been told that before. I think, Rush and I have been close for a really long time. And, I think for me, on a personal level, healing wise, when I was diagnosed with my brain tumor, the first thing that I wanted was nobody to know. And I made my family, I made Johnny and Willie, I made everyone swear that they wouldn't say a word, because I looked at my tumor as weakness. Mm-hmm. And that kind of speaks to my front. And I think with once I kind of got over that and I was able to kind of open up and kind of outline the journey, and Rush made it extremely safe. I just became so much more approachable in that sense, maybe still, I'm kind of introverted as a trait I have, and once you get to intimately know me, I tend to shine a little bit more. And I definitely struggled with every time somebody approached me, somebody wanted something from me. Mm-hmm. And so the easiest way to push that away was to maybe look to the ground and not, look up. And so but when we were on the river, that's where I connected the most. And that's where my strongest relationships in life have resonated from. And that's what I held near and dear to my heart. And so, when I was in public, I would definitely keep my inner circle tight. And yeah.
That's fully understandable. Before we get, sorry, were you going to say something, Rush?
No, you're all good. Go ahead.
Before we get too deep into this, because there's a lot to unpack, and definitely got to be cognizant of not giving away the movie, but like, there's just so many years of paddling and projects and places and just things that I know all the listeners are going to want to hear from you, Scott. And I knew that this project was going to be different. Number one, talking to you a little bit before this, but when that Outside Magazine article came out, it became very clear that you guys were going down like a totally different direction. It mentioned some things about when you were young and various things. So I just want to start off by asking, where are you from? Are you a mountain kid? How did kayaking become something you were doing?
No, I was not a mountain kid. I spent a good proportion of my youth in the valley and in Southern California in pretty rough neighborhoods. I got super lucky. I, was basically moved to Rockland, California, next door to a Grand Canyon River guide that had a guide school. And that's kind of what got me into the river scene. And yeah, I got super lucky in that first sort of experience. My first river trip was Giant Gap on the North Fork of the American at like 15 years old. And that really changed my life. And then I went to guide school, and that put a huge impression on me. And then I got super lucky right out of guide school at like 17 years old. I went and did 2 back-to-back Grand Canyon trips and rode baggage. And that just changed everything for me. At that point, I just knew that I wanted to run rivers. I had already started to kayak a little bit at that point. And it just changed the entire trajectory of my life in a very short period of time.
And the camera, when did that come along?
The camera, that's funny. A lot of people ask me about the camera. That didn't come along till years later. I didn't make my first film until I was 25 years old. I had spent already 5 years in the Himalayas at that point. I had done a year in Costa Rica. I was living, in 19, 20, and 21. I was living on the North Fork of the Payette. I was, guiding for Cascade Raft Company on the South Fork of the Payette. That's when I kind of met Jerry and Charlie. And that's where Asia Jerry, had spent so many years in Asia, running Equator Raft and Ultimate Descents. And that's when I met those guys. And Charlie and I went and did the Stikine when I was 20 years old, and came off of the Stikine, and Jerry, invited us over to come, to Nepal. And I basically blew off school at that point and, flew over to Asia. And that was really the beginning of the end as far as like my trajectory and what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I went to Asia and came back from Asia. And that's when I really started to open up the book on California, because I was looking at California and, Lars was close. I got to paddle with Lars a lot as a kid and was super grateful for the time that I got to spend with him. But I took that mentality from the Himalayas and I pushed it to California. And that the mentality in the Himalayas was, you would walk for days on end to get to a put in and put on in the middle of nowhere and run these things in the middle of nowhere. And, you were doing ridiculous bus rides and, basically operating in places where there are no rules. And that sang to my heart. And yeah, just got really lucky, I feel like. And it was in the right place at the right time doing the right thing, and was super passionate about it. The sport was turning over tenfold at that point too. The boat designs had been stuck in the 80s and 70s and 80s. And then in the early 90s, For whatever reason, new generation of paddlers, boat design started to, every year it seemed like tenfold the sport was turning over with new designs that was exponentially changing the face of what we were able to run. And you know, we just happened to be there with a handful of people.
So you were wetting your teeth at kayaking at 17, and then by 20 you were on the Stikine.
Yeah, 3 years.
I like that.
And that was that was the game changer. You know, Charlie was obsessed. He was obsessed with the Stikine. The North Fork was the training grounds. Rob Lesser was around the North Fork. John Wasson was on the North Fork at that time. Ammons was on the North Fork at that time. I remember actually arriving in Banks, and Ammons was working with Wilcox, and they were doing the vertical mile, where Ammons had paddled 7 laps on the North Fork in a day, paddled something like a vertical mile, and I was in the parking lot and on the river when he did that, and you know, started training on the North Fork with Charlie. At the time, Charlie was the man on the North Fork. I mean, he's a little bit older than me. He's 4 or 5 years older than me, but he was, you know, he had the thing wired. He was hand paddling the North Fork, which nobody else was really doing.
And this is Charlie Muncie to our audience.
Charlie Muncie, yeah. Sorry, I don't. No. Yeah, Charlie Muncie. And so, yeah, he and Charlie and I hit it off. And I started to learn the North Fork, and that's when the Stikine started to kind of come up. And it was in I graduated high school in 91. So 92, you know, we went to Asia, came back from Asia. Charlie had gone up with Conrad, and those two put on and did the 4th self-support descent of the Stikine, just the two of them. And Charlie came back from that trip and was like, man, we need to go run the Stikine. He wanted to go right back up the following year. And Jerry Moffett was working with us on the South Fork of the Payette, and we were basically running the North Fork. And that's when, you know, we basically made the pact to go up and do the 5th descent, self-support descent of the Stikine. And then, and Ammons was, you know, a figure back then. He was the only one writing about kayaking. I think his literature plays into his lore more than his actual kayaking feats, but he you know, he was influential to Charlie. Charlie and him were close, and I at the time, you know, had a lot of respect for Doug, and he had just gotten, you know, I think he had just done his solo the year before Charlie and Conrad had gone up. So yeah, I mean, we conversed, and I remember getting off that trip, and I remember Charlie calling him when we got off the river, and he asked me, you know, what it felt like in there, and I said, I felt like I just went to war, but I loved every minute of it, and you know, it was amazing, and to be able to get to write my name on that chalkboard. I don't know if you ever got to see the chalkboard or a picture of the chalkboard.
First time I was there.
Yeah, and then that got taken down by the dam builders, that those buildings got flown out of there and stuff. But yeah, just to have your name on that chalkboard and look at the list, you know, and the history on that, you know, everybody that I had an immense amount of respect for as far as expedition kayaking was concerned was on that chalkboard, and was just so honored to be a part of it.
So at some point, so that's interesting, because I didn't realize you had spent so much time in Asia and whatever before you made your first film.
Yeah, so the first film I actually was a part of was the first descent of the Thule. Charlie and I had gone over in 92, and then we made an attempt in 93 on the Thule. We walked something like 9 days to get into the bottom of the Thule, and this was in, like, I want to say late October, middle October, and we get to the bottom of the gorge of the Thule and realize that the river is like ridiculously way too high, and we end up walking up, you know, probably about 5 to 7K, and realized that none of it was really runnable at the level that we were there at. And we turned around and paddled the 60 or 80K out to the bridge. And then the following year, we came back again, and we flew into Dunai, and we walked up to Lake Poksendo and scouted that thing and scouted the upper reaches. And then the plan was to walk down the Thule and scout it. And we were at the bar in Dunai, and this Russian walks in, and we start getting drunk with him. And he basically is a helicopter pilot that was flying one of those Russian M15s. And he's like, man, just jump on and I'll fly you down the thing on your way out. And we're like, sweet. And so that's exactly what we did. We woke up the next morning, hungover, jumped in one of those double-bladed Russian helicopters, and he's like, come sit right in the front seat. And we sat right in the front seat, and he like flew us down and stopped above stuff. And we basically scouted the whole thing, and we were just like, holy shit, man, this thing's so freaking runnable. We're coming back next year. And that's exactly what we did. We came back, and at that point we had reached out, Charlie was obsessed with trying to make a film on it. And we had reached out to John Wasson, and John Wasson was kind of connected to the film world back in those days. He had done the river safety stuff with the River Wild, and he was close friends with Roger Brown. Roger Brown was the man. I would argue that outside of Rush being the most influential filmmaker, I would argue that Roger Brown is probably the most influential filmmaker in the history of kayaking. He's responsible for Walt Blackadar's, Descent, The Devil's Canyon Descent. Made films about that. He's responsible for the first descent of the Stikine. He's also responsible for the 1986 raft descent of the Stikine. He also did the Rivers of the Maya with the Schneider brothers and Ammons down in Mexico on the Agua Azul. And he worked with Wilcox, American Adventure Productions. Those guys are out of Colorado. And Wilcox was actually the one that we had got connected with, and we had sent the proposal to Roger, and Roger got a hold of it. We were shot down by National Geographic. They didn't want to have anything to do with us, and Roger picked it up, and he sold it to Wilcox. And all of a sudden we went from two kids that really had no desire other than to go kayaking, and all of a sudden we had a film, and Jerry was a part of it, and Doug Ammons was all of a sudden a part of it, and Danielle Christ was a part of it, and boom, 1995 flew over to Nepal, and the first descent of the Thule went down.
Yeah, that goes.
And that was my first exposure. What was happening was that there was this assistant that was along. Her name was Debbie, and it was Roger's assistant. She worked for Wilcox, and Roger was in his 60s at that point, and he couldn't get down to the river. And so Roger, kind of threw it out there and asked if any of us would be interested in picking up a camera and, shooting some of it. And I was like, sure, I'll, pick up a camera. And so I picked up the camera, and I just started to shoot a bunch of stuff at river level, and ended up shooting a bunch, didn't really know what I was doing. And the film came out, and it got accepted into Banff, and it won like best documentary at Banff that year. And that was really the beginning, at that point. And I had already been, kayaking for, it was like 95, 4 years out of high school. I was 24 years old at that point, 23, 24 years old. So, yeah.
There you go. That speaks to your point earlier, Rush, about the history not being told of the sport. That's the first I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, that's a big chunk of kayaking history.
Yeah, there's that's part of it. I'm super excited because, I feel like to reference back to the Outside article, Rush and I had been working, probably, what were we in, Rush, like 2 years or something like that before, the Outside article came out, and I had started working with Thayer, and my disdain, I should be very careful here, my disdain for writers from the past, was on high alert, and I had no desire to do the article. And Thayer had reached out and he had pushed me, in interest. And I didn't know Thayer very well. I'd heard of him, a few times over, through a few instances. We'd spoke on the phone and stuff, but he came up and we hung out a little bit, and he's like, "What's it going to take for you to do this article? I think there's an amazing story here." And I was like, "Look, I need to know that you can understand what I'm trying to say and that it can be conveyed. And there's only one way that that's going to happen, is if you give me editorial control." And he was like, "Fuck off, that's never going to happen. And outside's never going to go for that." And I was like, "See you later. Have a nice life. I could care less." 2 weeks go by. He calls back and he's like, "Dude, they gave you editorial control. That's only happened twice in the history of Outside Magazine." And I was like, "Okay, let's rock and roll this thing." So Thayer and I sat down for the better part of 3 weeks, and I basically dropped the bomb on him, and he's amazing. He was able to articulate in a way that, I'm dyslexic, I can't write for anything, and he was able to articulate in a way that was unbelievable. And so the article came out, and Rush read the article, and we chatted, and the decision was made to bring Thayer on as a consulting writer for the film. And I think that along with Rush's assistant editor, Aiden, really changed the trajectory of the film, aside from the fact that, we were looking at making more of a film for the community versus making a film for a broader audience. And when those two came on board, it really, I started to really feel comfortable with everyone. I mean, I've known Rush. I had an immense amount of trust, and I knew that he was going to do the most incredible job ever. But once those two were brought on, I was like, all right, I've got nothing to lose here. Let's just send this thing and let the whole world know what's going on from top to bottom.
Yeah, because I think at that point I was really struggling with all of the threads that we kind of had going, because we had a cut of the film at one point that was like 2 hours, and the final's like 86 minutes or something. So I think there was an overwhelming amount of history, and this sort of kayaker nerd in me like really wanted to respect that and to show a lot of those threads. And it was pretty heartbreaking, honestly, to have to cut so much of that, like the stories that Scott just told, for example, and to have to cut Rob Lesser and Jerry Moffat and Mark Hayden and all these like incredibly awesome paddlers and influential people. But at the end of the day, that's kind of what editing is, and that's really where bringing in a professional writer, Thayer Walker, and then Aidan Haley, a professional editor who helped me with that process. I think it definitely changed the film a lot, I think for the better, for a more mainstream audience. Maybe someday there'll be a kayaker's cut or something. I don't know.
Yeah, we've talked about that. So back to your original thing there, John. Thayer and I basically, from the Outside article and from the movie, we signed a deal a little over a year ago with Penguin Random House, and we're doing a full-fledged book together. Oh, cool. So all these intricacies in these stories are hopefully going to come out, and hopefully most of it will come out, and people will have an intricate look inside.
When did the Four Rivers plan hatch, and kind of describe to our listeners what that is?
Yeah, man. So, first of all, I want to, how do I phrase this? The accolade of the Four Rivers is, I don't know that there's an accolade there. For me, the Sangpo was at the center of it. And it's right from my very first trip to Nepal, the Sangpo came into play. Charlie was absolutely obsessed with it. You know, Allardyce had been in there and walked along the Po Sangpo. David Allardyce has since passed, melanoma cancer, and he was incredible. I was incredibly close to him. I worked for him. He ran Ultimate Descents in Nepal. He was the gas man. He made everything go in Asia. He was an incredible human being, hardcore on the first descent of the Indus, 1981, with Jerry Moffat. And he had gone into Tibet and walked to Po Sangpo, and I had sat down, Charlie and I had sat down and looked at the images. And even prior to like the Thule berry and all of that stuff, there was a moment actually, I don't know if you guys know this guy's name is Jeff Parker. He had got the Malden Mills grant back in the day when those guys were giving away $10,000. And Charlie and I are over in Asia, and this guy, he's from like Colorado, and he had reached out to us, and he had heard that we were looking at the Sangpo. And that was the first sort of formal attempt. We had hooked up in Pokhara.
What year was that?
This is like 1994. 94. So this is 3 years before the first attempt in 97 with just Charlie and I on the Po Sangpo.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Parker showed up, and he had been in Nepal about a month before we had gotten there. And this is a pretty funny story. He met us, and he's like, "Hey, you know, I've got this grant. Let's go over, and we'll go to pay, and we'll put on, and we'll, you know, paddle out, you know, and do the whole thing." And so we're like, sweet. So we went to start organizing, you know, everything. We started organizing vehicles to get into Tibet.
Wait. He was going to do the whole thing, meaning from where to where?
We were going to basically go up the Friendship Highway. Yeah. We were going to get to Shigati. We were going to take the right turn. We were going to go to pay. We were going to put in, and then we were going to float into India and then be with the planet blacklisted
received as heroes
China for the rest of our lives.
I mean, did you guys know what was below Rainbow?
No, we had no fucking clue as to what was going on. Zero.
Yeah, but it was a good plan at the time.
This before the internet and
thing was, all these Charlie, and even back in those days, Charlie had you know, maps, and we you know, the
where did you get the maps from?
Well, there's a bunch of different stories on the map situation in Asia.
I know, because I have
in Asia. It's terrible.
You know, we had a trip planned there too, or I was on a trip that was going there also, and
yeah. Well, do you remember the phone conversation that we had? Do you remember?
No, Grace mentioned that. I swear to God, I don't. You have a much better memory than I do, obviously.
It's funny that you don't have any recollection of that.
What did I say? Like, get off my turf?
No, not at all, man. You actually, the conversation was something along the lines, you had called me and said, "Hey, what's going on over there? I'm a little bit worried about the levels."
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I've been in touch with the boys over there, and they're on a 50-year monsoon.
Yeah.
And I was in touch with this guy named Lucas Bulkus. He's an heir to the BMW family, and he was obsessed with this with the Sangpo as well.
Yeah.
And he had developed this contraption actually that was this bow and arrow with a line that he was planning to shoot across the arrow to get back and forth across the river if he got stuck on one side of the river or not.
That seems reasonable.
So prior to, you know, I was set to fly over, you know, right when when the Wick Walker crew was set to fly over. We both had caught wind. I had gotten money from outside. Those guys, you know, National Geographic chose them over us.
Yeah, I was on that trip to the last minute.
Yeah, I remember. And then you pulled at the last minute, and you know, maybe it was because of our conversation, maybe it wasn't, but I get Lucas is in Tibet, and he goes out to pay, and he's at pay, and this is prior to any of us flying over. This is like in September, and you know, at this point we're playing yin and yang. You know, I originally wanted to go in December. I wanted to go with a lower flow. Next thing I know, you guys are going in November. Next thing I know, you guys are going in October. And then at that point, I start getting phone calls, from David and from everyone else saying, hey, look, we're sitting on a 50-year monsoon, things raging. And Lucas had reached out to me on a couple different occasions, and I get an email from him. I get a message from him, and he's like, hey, can I call you? And I was like, yeah, call me. This is this is back in the day too, when it's a big deal to make a phone call from Tibet. And I don't even think actually email was in play at this point. It might have been, but I kind of remember faxes. And he's like, don't come. The river's completely blown out. It's bank to bank. There's nowhere to move in there. It's not worth coming. And so at that point, I felt like I made one of the hardest decisions up until that point. I was like, okay, I pulled the plug and let, those guys go for it. And I rebounded, and 3 months later, swung into Nepal and drove 8 days across the plateau, did the circumnavigation around Kailash, and then did the headwaters of the Karnali, 12,000 foot descent, 150 miles in 12 or 13 days, with what I had basically sold as the Sangpo had basically turned into the Karnali. And then, after Doug Gordon passed, the Chinese shut the gorge down indefinitely at that point to almost all tourism. So it's kind of, but I had gone back in 97. So, that first, back to Parker, we were in Nepal in 94, and basically, he was like, let's go do it. And Charlie and I started to organize everything, and we knew he had about $10,000, and Charlie and I were up to $8,000 in a blink. By the time we calculated the food and the vehicle ride and the visas and everything to get into Tibet, and then, the whole thing, we were at we were just under $10,000 or right at $10,000. And Jeff had come back to us and was like, man, I only got about $4,000 left from the $10,000 they gave me. I spent all the money. And we're just like, okay, well, Charlie and I were broke. And so, we didn't have the money to basically go and pull this thing off. And that's when we kind of, walked away from Jeff Parker and, carry on. And then in 97, it was a similar situation where Steve Curry, who is probably the most underrated river explorer in the history of river exploration, period. He was on the first descent of the Congo, top to bottom, first descent of the Columbia River Gorge before it was dammed, first descent of the Fu-de-le-Fu, first descent of the Biobío. He organized the first descent of the Salween, raft descents. He had attempted to do a raft descent on the upper Sangpo. He was incredible, and he reached out to me, and I had known him. His father was a Grand Canyon outfitter. His dad invented the J-rig, which is that huge motor rig, and that's where he was pulling his clientele to go do these trips. He reached out to me. He's like, man, I want to go rafting on the Sangpo. I've got clients who are going to pay $20,000 a pop. I got 10 of them. Go in there and figure that thing out for me. And I was like, you want to raft?
Figure it out.
You want to do a recon mission to the Sangpo and give Charlie and I a shot? And he's like, yep, and I've got the contacts to pull it off. And I was like, rock and roll, buddy, here we go. And so Charlie and I, just the two of us, with Steve Curry and one of his best friends, this guy Mark, who was on the first descent of the Congo with them. They didn't run what Rush and Fisher and those guys ran. They ran everything above and everything below, and huge motor rigs. Something like the Prince of Wales ended up coming over and getting on their boat for half the trip. But we went over there, and we showed up in April, and it had already started to warm up. And
what year was that?
This is in 97.
Right.
In 97, yeah. And so we went to pay, and there's this interview. I'm sure Rush came across, but we're just basically standing right at pay at the rapids, and we're just like, didn't even feel like we could move around in there. Just didn't even feel like we could make it to the other side of the river safely. Just felt like even the side stuff was like off the scale. And so we wrapped around and we're like, okay, screw it. Let's not deal with the upper canyon. Let's wrap around Jalapuri and go do the Posangpo. And then boom, get to the confluence, and the gradient by then has, exponentially less. Once you get down below the Paiute Gorge and the Luku Gorge, from Goddam down, which is the lower canyon, it just looked more feasible on the maps. And so we cruise around and we get to the Posangpo, and and the Posangpo's huge. And we're just like, oh my God, this thing is huge. And it's just the two of us in the middle of nowhere with a guy that's kind of running down the road and running down a trail, two guys that are kind of supporting us a little bit. And we put on, and, we did like 3 days on the Posangpo. And
that was you and Charlie?
Charlie and I, yep. And it was loose. It was not the smartest decision-making going on there. And we got to a point to where basically pull the plug, and we're just going to walk to the confluence. And we're walking, and we run into an American crew. We run into George Schaller, Ian Baker, Hamid Hardar, and Ken Storm. And those guys are in there, quote unquote, doing a documentary about the indigenous Ompas and Lompas, the folks that live within the inner canyon of the gorge. And long story short, they basically were going in and documenting the white man discovery of Hidden Falls and Rainbow Falls. They had basically not told us what they were up to, and
I think F. Kingdon Ward was in there in the 19th century, right? That botanist guy.
He was the plant hunter from England.
Yeah, exactly.
And his book was our Bible.
Right.
We read
Mystery Rivers of Tibet.
100% Shangri-La. Yeah. I mean, that was the whole lore. It was his book that drove the whole thing.
For sure.
And so, and so. And then from there it was we got to the confluence and the two rivers, we sat there, and there was maybe 100, maybe 200,000 CFS in there. It was ridiculous. It was so off the scale. Even at the confluence, it was so off the scale.
I grew up learning about. I grew up paddling with McEwen. McEwen taught me how to kayak. And from when I was, 9 years old, he was telling us stories about the Sangpo and how that was going to be the biggest whitewater descent of all time. And he had read Kingdon Ward's book. And he had a picture he had found in a National Geographic taken in the 50s in the Brahmaputra going upstream. And it was during an extreme drought. And he felt like there was, 10,000 CFS in that river at some point. Down there, or completely, it was a riverbed was very, very low, and he was like, "There is a way to do that gorge if I could see the river that low again." And,
I totally agree, and hence why I it's pretty wild, man. This year, 2022, January 20th, I turned 50 years old, and that is the day that I flew to the Sangpo, and that will be our 20-year anniversary of the Sangpo expedition in 2002. 20 years.
What the hell is happening?
And so when we flew over in the dead of winter. I was like, I'll bear the winter conditions. For the lowest possible flow. And it was the single biggest sort of obstacle. There were two huge obstacles outside of a million other things, but the two biggest obstacles river-wise was flow and getting over the Ascension Law in the dead of winter. Those two things were, we weren't sure we could get up over that pass, and we got super lucky. we had the driest winter on record in 15 years. We had gotten to the Ascension Law. We made it up over the Ascension Law, and that next day it rained for 2 days straight and probably snowed 3 feet. We barely made it over that pass. Followed by it had rained and snowed the next day. And we had gotten below the snow line, and we had pushed and gone up and over in 1 day.
Describe to our listeners the importance of that portage over that pass.
Well, it actually, oh man, it's tricky because we knew the 8 miles from Rainbow Falls to the confluence was completely off the scale. We had always used the Stikine as the sort of, we used that as the perfect specimen. It was like Stikine, 60 feet a mile, 15,000 CFS. Site Z mile, 120-foot mile. We always felt like it was runnable. Okay, so if stuff got to be 120 feet a mile on the Sangpo, there was room. And if there was 10,000 CFS, boom, we could maybe move around in there. The stretch from the northeast corridor to Clear Creek. Now, this is the last stretch, before you get to the portage to walk over the Ascension Law. It starts out like at Pay. There's a 60-foot mile there, and then you get down below Gala, and you get into the 80-foot per mile stuff, and then you get into the 120 stuff, and then you get into the northeast corridor, and then the stretch right above Clear Creek, which is right above Rainbow Falls. You're at 200 feet per mile. So 200 feet per mile, 10,000, 15,000 CFS. Yeah, there's probably not much runnable in there. And so flow was everything. And I had heard a rumor. It was at the Explorers Club. I was at the Explorers. I had been connected through Les Guthman, who was the executive producer for Outside Television, and he had a connection at the Explorers Club, and he had heard of this guy in Minnesota who had snuck out of Russia and with all of the military grade topographical maps. And I got his number somehow, and I called him up, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for the Sangpo River. I'm looking for the Sangpo Gorge. Do you have maps? And he's like, abso-fucking-lutely. He sent them over. And so we get the maps, and the maps are the most legit maps I've ever seen of the Himalayas, hands down. The map that we used for the Karnali was a handwritten map, and it was so categorically wrong that it basically, Charlie had a meltdown once we got into the headwaters of the Karnali, because nothing that the map had shown us was what was reality. I mean, we got into the upper Karnali, and the walls grew like 15,000 feet on both sides. And we were just like, whoa, we just pushed this thing way too far. With the Russian maps, we were able to actually calculate, the gradient, and get a really good idea of like what we were up against. 2 months ago, I get another call from the executive producer from Outside Les, and he's like, hey man, I got this company. They're out of Seattle. They've got this demilitarized satellite. It's called Iconis. I think we can get some images of the Sangpo. Now, this is like pre-Google. This is anything that was satellite imagery at that point was all military grade. Nobody could get their hands on it. I call these guys up. I'm like, hey man, we're looking at doing this river. And they're like, yeah, absolutely, we can do it. And the guy sends me an email with an invoice, and he wants to do 20 images, and he wants $7,000 an image. He sends me an invoice for like $125,000. And I was like, yo, man, we don't have $125,000 for 20 images. We'll just use these Russian maps and go blind. And Les was like, let me call him. And Les got us on the phone. We're like, hey, we're doing an NBC. We're doing an outside cover story. We're doing this. We're doing that. What do you think about doing a sponsorship deal? We'll push Iconis, and boom, cut the deal, man. And those guys took pictures for us. And so they went over there and took and I'll never forget when I got the disc, man. I put the disc in the computer. It took like a half an hour.
That would be the
sickest
shit.
Half an hour to unload, because back in this day it was like, they were 500 meg images, and like the computer froze like twice. Because they were, you had to have a supercomputer to like bring these things up. And I remember sitting there and I opened up the thing and I was like, oh my God, we can move around in there. And not only can we move around in there, there's space. Like we can, there's like, and before I left Auburn, California, I had a really good vibe that if I got to the put-in and we had a flow and Cinch and Law was doable, we had a really good shot at this thing.
So did the pictures he sent you, were they similar flows that you had? Like, were they recent pictures? Like, how?
It's really they what was so wild was that the Golof had happened. So that was in between 97 and 2002. So that was no, I take that back. The Golof. No, the Golof had not happened at that point. We got the images. This is in 2000. The Golof, I think, happened in 2001, late 2001, and we were 2002 because everything was still intact. And then when a Golof is a glacial land outburst flood, right? It's basically a landslide, blocks the river. The river eventually goes back to its natural course. It happened on the Po Sang Po. The locals there describe it as a 300-foot wall of water that came down the Po Sang Po, turned the corner, and ripped out the entire bottom end of the Sang Po. And so our Iconis maps didn't have the bottom end of the Sang Po. We only had the top end of the Sang Po. But this was the crazy part. Alan Ellard, he gets to Auburn because I fly everybody in, and he takes the Russian topos and he sets the Iconis satellite images over the Russian topos, and they're perfect, absolutely perfect. And so that was it. We had these Russian maps, we had the topos, and yep, that was the beginning of like really feeling confident that, and modern technology just felt confident that if we got a flow, we were able to get to the put-in, which was a feat in itself. And I won't go into it too much because a lot of the book is the inner workings of what it took to pull that thing off. I mean, there was so many backyard, deals and yeah, just absolute fist fight to get in there.
When we were planning our trip, Wick Walker, who let's just say he worked for the State Department.
Yeah.
He drove to Confluence and he was like, I need to show you something. I'm like, all right, you don't need to drive up here, but okay. He drives up and he goes into like our office at IR. It's like the first year IR is in existence, and this is in Confluence, population 300. And he takes out this big wad of maps and he closes all the window shades before he opens them up. Like, we're in Confluence, man. There's no one outside the windows here.
Yeah.
But that's how protective he was of these things. And, of course, he couldn't discuss where he got and where they came from.
Yeah.
All the trips we did before that, we did off of TPCs or ONCs, which was like big white spots.
Up until 2002. I mean, from 1990 for me all the way to 2002. I mean, almost everything was in the dark.
Yeah.
Everything was in the dark.
Altitude thought not to exceed 6,000 feet. That would be that's what you had to go off of.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the good old days.
So, man, There's so much to unpack right there in that story.
You're gonna have to wait for the book, man.
Exactly.
The book's gonna unpack the whole thing. Yeah. I swear. We're gonna unpack the whole thing on that, and the Carnally too, and just the river exploration within the Himalayas. It's just I hope to unpack as much of that. It's funny because the early explorers of the Himalayas, it's all British. The Brits own the Himalayas. All the early stuff, the Mick Hopkinsons and the Dave Manbys and the Jerry Moffats and the Green Slime, Peter Knowles and all those guys, those guys were savage. I mean, they're just, middle of nowhere, 50-hour bus rides, hiking into stuff and just disappearing for months and months on end. For 4 or 5 years there, even before I made my first film, I would go over and I'd get done in Grand Canyon, and then I would go over in September, and I would stay until December. And the only communication I had home was a fax machine and a phone call, and there was no nothing. You just disappear and just do savage bus rides and go run rivers. And there was a guidebook for us back in those days too. David and Peter Knowles had collaborated on a Nepal whitewater guidebook, and that was useful back in those days. And so we were able to cruise around with that thing and kind of figure some stuff out. But
will the Sangpo get run top to bottom ever?
Well,
and how do you do
it? If they build a dam, you know what I mean? You're talking 300 feet a mile. And the canyon below Rainbow Falls and Hidden Falls it's
very scoured.
And there's no room to move around in there. I mean, you go and look at the satellite images, and there's just no room to move around in there.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a dam built above it, and there was a couple thousand CFS coming out the bottom of that thing, and they were diverting everything over to the Yellow River, which is something they've talked about doing. Mm-hmm. Then at that point, there absolutely could be a way to do it. And even if you didn't do that stretch, there's been this, we didn't finish the expedition sort of thing. You know what I mean? And I kind of look at it like the section that we did is kind of like Royal Gorge. And what's left on the Sangpo is the lower end of it's kind of like Generation and Giant Gap, in that it's in the foothills at that point. You're out on the backside of Namche Barwa and Jalapuri at that point. Where we stopped kayaking at the apex of the Great Bend, there is one other gorge, the Paiyu Gorge, and then there's one other gorge below that. This is the Luku Gorge. Could the kids go in there and run that and pull that shit off? Absolutely. I mean, we've always thought that there was a possibility, and truth be told, here the last when I got back from the Indus, I made the last 2 years I made a full court press to try to get back in there, and to no avail. Just it's so locked down right now, and the problem with it is that the politicians are being bought out by mining companies and dam engineer firms, and the money's $2,000, and they don't want to mess with something that's going to potentially make them lose face, because everything in China is about saving face. And anytime you put your stamp on, and it takes four different sort of it takes 4 different permissions. You need a local permission, you need a tourist visa, you need military, and then you need the CCP. I think you got that. Yeah. And so I got super lucky in that, on our trip in 2002, I was working with this woman in Tibet who had connections politically in Beijing. And she turned me on to the Academy of Sciences in Beijing. The head of the Academy of Sciences went to school, grew up with a military general in the Chinese military. So there was this whole transaction that happened with me flying to Beijing, me cutting a deal with the Academy of Sciences and basically telling them that we were going in as a an expedition to explore the sort of botany, geology sort of thing. And, we need to kayak to get to some of these places. That's kind of how we sold it to the Academy of Sciences. And then I straight up bought off a military general to give us the stamp to get in there with outside money. Basically how that went down.
Dude,
once we got that stamp, then it was a fist fight to basically get from Lhasa to the put-in. Every single town we drove through, I was basically in a back room paying local officials off.
In hindsight, Scott, do you think there was a way for you to do that trip light and right without all the porter support and all that kind of thing? Like, knowing what you know now, you got the permits, you got the ability to do it. Could you have?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is the length, right? Even this last couple years when I trying to, I went down and I mapped out the entire lower end of the river, and then I went day by day as to how many days I think it would take to run the lower canyon. And I think I had us doing it I think we could do it in like 10 to 14 days, but I gave us 20 days. So I was basically, roughly. So it really just comes down to, and this was really difficult for the 2002 expedition. Is like, look, you're burning 3,000 calories, 4,000 calories a day, right? And you have to eat. And so, we all jumped on the scale before we went on the Sangpo expedition, and I forget who lost the most weight, but I think Willie lost like 35 pounds. I was like 160. I came home weighing like 137. My face was caved in. We just weren't able to eat enough. So I think, if there was a way to food cache, if you did, maybe you hire out a helicopter and you do food caches, and so you can carry 5 days worth of food. But if you're loading your boat up with 10, 15 days worth of food, and then you're dropping in there and you're running that stuff in super heavy boats, yeah, I think the kids could be able to go in there and knock a huge percentage of it out, no doubt about it. But if they were in light kayaks, and they were going in there to stunt to see what could actually be done in a kayak, big water wise, that's a different vibe. We were in there surviving.
Yeah.
When we were on the Indus, what makes the Indus so unbelievable is the fact that there's a road right by it. So you're able, you're at either point, you can be in Gilgit or Skardu in a certain amount of time, or you can be in Gilgit. And both of those places have airports, and you're running light kayaks. You're able to get away with, so much. You're able to get away with so much in a lighter boat. So yes and yes. You could, I know that Stewksbury has, he's been gunning for that thing ever since we got off of it. And I'd love nothing more in the whole world to share that place with him, or anybody for that matter, to get back in there. It's unbelievable to me that we're 20 years out from this trip, and nobody else has been able to get back in there to go do that thing. Because I still, I think it's every bit as big as anything on the Indus. I think our film just doesn't do it justice. I mean, to the trained eye, you can kind of see what's going on in there, and you can look at some of the stills and kind of see what's going on in there. But once you start sitting on 100 feet per mile, 200 feet per mile with 10, 15,000 CFS, it's just, it's yeah.
Yeah, and you guys weren't charging batteries, flying drones, all the things that you can do.
No.
When you got
no, I mean, one of the things that we had talked about, Steve was, super fired up to take one of those like parasailer things with a motor. And, there was talk of like, bringing that thing and flying down it with that, but yeah, I mean, there's been a lot, and there were, when I was there in 97, there were 2 helicopters that were available in Bayou. And we went to the airport to actually with Curry and tried to potentially rent the helicopter. We got there And, because we had heard that they were there, we got there, and something like 6 months before we had gotten there, the two helicopters over the Ascension Law, or to the right of the Ascension Law, I forget the name of the pass that goes over to Maydog. Maydog is the town just before the confluence, or just before the border of India. They had collided and blown up. And so the two helicopters that we were hoping to maybe rent out had collided and blown up on the pass over to Maydog. And so, boom, that was out of the equation at that point. And so then it was like, yeah, but, absolutely with the drones and, the other thing that's really sad that's going on there right now is there's 200 plus hydroelectric projects in the eastern corner of Tibet. They're gonna destroy the whole place, man. There's rumors now they're talking about, and I keep going back and forth with Chris Jones a little bit online about it. Like there's media coming out that they're going to build one right at the bottom there at Maydog, and the infrastructure. This is another thing from Godum, which is where we stopped and walked up to the confluence, and we didn't run the Luku or the Paiyu Gorge. That stretch from Godum down to the border, you go down about 20 miles, and a new road comes down, and the bottom end of the Sangpo is roadside.
What?
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time before they blast the road and that whole thing, dude.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we were told when we were there that they were, because they were kicking all the locals out when we were there. They were forcing them to go to Bayou. And we were told that they were turning it into a national park and by the locals. That's kind of what the word on the street was when we were in there. But, looking back now, the idea of building a dam at Maydog, and, initially what they wanted to do was divert the river around Namche Barwa and then tunnel it to Maydog and basically dry out the entire Great Bend and leave nothing but the Po Sangpo. And then they've got dams proposed on the Po Sangpo all the way to the top. So, I mean, it's just, and that's the Himalayas. That's all of the Himalayas. I mean, everything in Nepal has been, the Karnali is the last free-flowing river left in Nepal, and that thing is got several dam projects pushing. And India, same thing. I mean, the Sutlej. If you ever saw the Sutlej footage that we did in one of the kayak movies back in the day, that they we squeezed through there right as they were finishing up a reservoir on that thing. So, yeah, super sad.
Rush, what was your favorite Scott Lindgren VHS movie?
I liked Thirst. That was my favorite. I liked the there's a shot of, I don't think it's actually Steve Fisher. I always thought it was, but there's someone freewheeling Spirit, and I used to watch that over and over again. Just that one clip, just like rewind. But yeah, I mean, I was hooked on all the old movies, Yeah, all of them. Dude, I've watched them a lot more times while making this movie.
Oh my god, it's got to be sick.
I bet you have. Dude. Are you guys still friends?
300 hours of archival. 300. Yeah, there's a lot.
So many. I feel so bad for you, bud.
Yeah, and most of it's most of it's so bad too. Like, just whatever. Some of the playboating stuff, you're just like, really, I'm going through all this, but
yeah, it's terrible. It felt just as bad shooting it, but I was never down.
If anybody goes through all my old material, it'll be the same
It's so process. Out to lunch, just pretending to hold a camera while somebody would, especially the playboating stuff. I struggled with that so much.
Are you guys still friends?
Yeah, yes, yeah, no, totally. We actually are. Surprisingly.
Did I have?
No, I'm not. I mean, I think we had one hot moment throughout the entire process, and then outside of that, it's been unbelievable. Like just this whole thing and the way that it worked out, just with the financing and all the different conversations and deals and the footage and everything. It's just the wind was at our back through this thing, because multiple occasions where we were over budget or couldn't find something or were struggling with something and just, running into these roadblocks, and then it would just kind of open up for us a little bit. And, I call that the flow of life. And it's amazing when you're in the flow of life and things are flowing and yeah, just super grateful for the process and the effort that Rush put into it. And one of I think the hardest things for me was, a lot of people have asked me, my brother in particular, is really pushing me, because when the first edits were coming out and stuff, I've made so many films in my life, and, he's like, why aren't you in there, like, editing and getting involved in the process of making this film? And I was like, Bud, I don't want to make a movie about myself, and I trust this kid, and I'm just going to let go and let it just evolve into whatever it is and let it be, and I tried, I stayed, I don't know, maybe Rush can attest to this, but I stayed at a distance from the film.
I didn't let Scott watch anything, actually, like the whole process.
Yeah, I got to see, my first cut was 2 years in? The first time I got to see the film was probably like 2 years in, is the first cut.
Yeah, I didn't even want to show it to you then.
No, I was like, hey, bud, you might want to show me the movie. I might be able to help you out with these things. And he was not even ready to show me the film then. And then it actually worked out. It worked out because it just really, that's when, Thayer came in. That's when Trish was brought into the film. That's when, the real human side of stuff started to kind of come out more, and it started to become a more broader audience film, is when Rush kind of let go of it at that point and let other people, in on the process. And it's pretty wild, man. We got some pretty amazing feedback from people. A lot of really good feedback, but we got some pretty amazing feedback.
That's
from
always so fun.
Some earlier cuts and stuff. Some just the whole setting your ego aside and trying to look through their ego when they're, giving feedback and trying to take nuggets and make a better film. That takes a lot of humility, and Rush navigated that like a gangster. It was amazing.
Got scars from that, Rush?
Yeah, I've got some PTSD from this film. Yeah, it's a process, but it's good, man. I learned a lot, and I feel like I'll definitely be more prepared the next. Well, if there is a next time for one of these things. Yeah, I
not a Grace movie. About that?
Yeah. Oh my God.
We have some LVM footage you can go through.
Hammer factor in the movie.
LVM footage or sifting through.
Dude, I wore out a copy of Liquid Lifestyles. Literally broke the tape. I watched it so many times, dude. Like, literally, it drug for a while, and eventually, like, the audio was off from the video, and it gets slow at places, and then finally it fucking snapped.
I got a backup copy of that somewhere. I might have.
You got it online, dude. I watch it all the time. I have my kids watch it the other day.
If all these old movies are available.
They're on my Vimeo. I got most of them. Here's the tragedy of all of the films. I don't have the master copy to Burning Time. I just have a DVD copy. It's lost on a hard drive, so that one kind of burns a little bit. But all the other ones I actually have mastered out to tape, and I'll end up putting the Burning Time, the DVD. I'll digitize that and put that thing up at some point as well. But yeah, it's so funny how
to dive into the archives.
I'll put a link to that on the show notes.
And it's all digitized now, so it's actually just a matter of going back and looking through some of that stuff.
This has been a cool conversation, because I feel like, the movie is awesome, and I appreciate like the human side of it, and that's the movie you guys are making. But like, I think there's this like inevitable reaction as a kayaker where you're like, wait, I want to like, get into the kayaking details, and like, I'm glad that we're getting the chance to do that now. It's good.
Yeah, man. Was Rush and I's biggest concern, or I can't speak for Rush, but we've talked about it at length. The film. If kayaking's the vehicle, It's just a vehicle.
It's like it has to be about something bigger than kayaking.
Yeah.
But if you're a kayaker, there's nothing.
But yeah, if you're 21 years old and you're on, you're watching Dane Jackson go kayaking every day, you're probably not going to get your fix in this film.
My 6-year-old wanted more Cobra flips. That was his only criticism.
Cobra, yeah,
he's like more Cobra flips.
Scott,
I have no desire to learn how to Cobra flip. I'm still working on my kick flips.
You almost had a little Cobra flip at Scott's drop, but you pulled it together.
Oh my god.
I want to talk about that, but I know I shouldn't talk about that. But
well, I mean, we could talk about Royal Gorge a little bit. I mean, that I don't mind. That aside from Scott's drop, it was more like for me. I had mentioned to Rush that like I really wanted to flush, because when we did the first descent of Royal, I ran Heath 1, Rattlesnake, and my drop on the first descent, and I left Heath 2. So Heath 2 and Wabena were the two that were left undone for me. And so, I just really wanted to go back in there and flush. And so, but man, I'm not a young kid, and I just don't have the dynamic range to throw the bottom end of my boat on the lip on the entrance to Scott's drop and swing on a left stroke and hurl myself. And more importantly, I was worried about the impact of that top drop. Evan Moore had gone a few days before, and Johnny Chase, those guys had gone like the week before we had gone, and like you listen to Evan hit, and he was like sore for like 4 days after that. You could hear the echo through the canyon when he hit. It was so freaking loud, and I just knew that I couldn't take a hit like that. I would just like crumble. And so I just went super old school with it, and I went the way that I originally ran it. I went on a righty, and I pulled with a righty, and the OG, if you get it out away from it, it's great, but if you land in it, it can get a little tricky, and I just didn't get far enough out from it. And it
was a sick line, though. I got to give you props. I thought you had a actually pretty sick line on the top drop. It just kind of happened to flip you. That was all,
God.
All right, so it's out in the open now. We can talk about it.
That was a clutch roll.
That was the most clutch shit.
I could hear Rush in the helicopter. Roll, wrong.
I was saying that in my house in front of my kids, dude. I was like cussing in front of them, like, God damn, shut up.
So someone in one of the audience asked us if we put that in for dramatization.
Oh my god. Like, did you cue that up and we're like, oh my god, you gotta go sit in that place and see how
all right, Scott, we're gonna need you to flip right now and ham this one up a little bit, right?
Get some John Ford dramatic. Jeez, I was so grateful that I came out the bottom of that thing in one piece. I was so sore at that point too. I was like, oh my god, I still got Wabena, and Rush gave me like the best advice ever. He's like, dude, just like run the left side of Wabena, just like stay on the left side. And the hardest hit that I took was actually on Rattlesnake.
I'm taking a hard hit there too.
Man, Rattlesnake literally almost concussed me. And I was just like super sore from that. And then got to the bottom of Scott's, and then got to Wabena, and then Rush was like, dude, I asked him, I was like, dude, what do you think, is the best? He's like, run the left side. It's way softer on that left side. And, Galen and Annual just, God, those guys are insane. And, I just went off the left side, and it was pillows over there, man. I felt so lucky and managed to hit my hand roll at the bottom, and felt so glorious at that moment. It was like, oh my God, I've spent my entire adult life living along the North Fork of the America, and that place is in my heart and soul, and I love that river so much. And to be at the bottom of that thing in one piece at 40, I think it was 47 or 48 years old at that point in the game, so thankful, man, so thankful.
Dude, what's your experience, Scott, like when you're in your 20s, you're paddling with your peers, age peers. And then when you're in your 30s, there's less people your age. You're paddling with a little bit of younger group. By the time you get to your 40s, I mean, you're sitting around and you're like looking with a bunch of kids. You're like,
man,
what the hell is going on here, dude?
Well, it's
like,
so funny, it was so easy when we were kids because we were all, like when the band was together in the 20s and stuff, in the run that we had, it's so, and Rush can speak to this too. We had our circle and we could go anywhere in the world, and after Chuck had passed, there was this pivotal moment where do we walk away or do we continue doing what we're doing? Because at that point, I think in the course of like 10 months, we lost 7 people and 4 were in the inner circle. And we're just like, and you have guys like Charlie Walbridge calling us out. Basically, I had Outside Magazine. There was a quote in there from Lars Holbeck: "If he lives to be 45, then we'll say he knew what he was doing." There was, there was just this like whole like sort of death vibe. It was crazy.
You had a little bit of a bullseye on your back during that time.
100%. And when we and once we kind of got over that, we got to this point where Willie and I were just like, I went and woke Willie up at like 1 o'clock in the morning drunk, and we went out to Forest Hill Bridge, and I was like, he was super angry, wasn't able to let go of it. It was super heavy time. This is probably like 6 months out. And I was like, what are we going to do, man? We don't have anything else. I mean, everything that we've done, we're so set up. Like when Chuck passed, we had just done the second descent of the Middle Kings. And we went to Outdoor Retailer. 2 days later, Chuck passed. And we were on top of the world when we got off the Middle Kings. The Middle Kings we were set. Sponsorship money was rolling. We were set to start just going anywhere and everywhere to knock it off. And then everyone starts dying around us. And we were just so lost. And we spent that winter, Johnny and Willie moved in with my brother on Donner Summit. And we spent that winter on Donner Summit. And we skied. And we just got to that point. Just like, what are we going to do? And that's when the whole sort of, what would Chuck want us to do? At this point, it's like, would he want us to stop and walk away at this point? Or, do we have a spirit in the sky here? And I was like, we've got a spirit in the sky. This guy is at our back. He's pushing us, and he still felt, when Chuck passed, there was this moment where Johnny, Willie, Buffy, and Aaron were all there, and a blue heron went and landed on top of the rock that Chuck went under, and they had to paddle out, and that blue heron basically led them down the river. And every time I see a blue heron, I think of him, and he was our driving force. I mean, he was the one. I mean, pound for pound, I think we all felt he was probably, if not the best kayaker in the world at that time, all-around kayaker in the world. He made the U.S. freestyle team. He was sending it harder than anybody. He was definitely the dominant personality on the river trip. His presence on the Middle Kings was so next level. I mean, he led that entire thing and didn't blink. And so once we kind of got over that hump, it was just like we just became numb at that point. We were just like, the only thing we want to do is just open up the maps and find the biggest, baddest rivers in the world and just send it as hard as we possibly can. And that's exactly what we did.
What the crew, like, you had your posse, you had your crew.
Yeah.
Like,
so back to your original question. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Yeah, sorry. Back to your initial question. So when the crew started to, at that point, Fisher came in, and Fisher and I had developed a relationship, and I became super close with Fisher. I mean, I spent 8 years in Africa with him, and we knocked off a lot of stuff, and Fisher actually convinced me that surfing big waves was the future of freestyle kayaking, because up until that point I wasn't convinced that freestyle kayaking had a place in other than introducing people to rivers. I didn't like the image of freestyle kayaking at all. I thought it was terrible. I thought it was ice skating. And I really liked what Fisher was doing with Alex Nix and Nico chasing on the Zambezi. And, when Fisher came on the Sangpo, we had hung out. He had come and lived with me. And so I had one community, and then we had shifted to the Fisher sort of reign. And then when that all started to change, because then it became me organizing money, me holding space, and helping a kid get to a space to where I felt comfortable filming him stunting in front of a camera. And that drains your soul. And you're not necessarily doing it for the right things at that point. And that wore on me. And the connection wasn't there like it was when I was doing it with the people that were closest to me, and how it started out. And when I got back in my kayak, the greatest gift ever was Rush and Annual and Tyler and Galen and all of these kids. They didn't push me away. They let me sit behind them and get it back. And look, you can go out there and you can start running rivers on your own, or you can do it with people that are at your level, but there's nothing like sitting behind an Annual or a Dane or a Geared and following them day in and day out on a river. The nuances and and at this point I took my ego out of the game. I was learning from them. There was nothing that, I could show up emotionally for them, and I can support them in ways that they hadn't been supported that way. But technically, kayaking wise, they were so far ahead. And for me to get that back, I needed them more than they needed me. And the fact that they even gave me the time to let me, sit behind them and get that back. I mean, and there's several occasions where Annual's like, dude, you're just not fucking paddling hard enough, or, you're not balanced, or you're doing this wrong, or you're doing, and I can openly go and ask, like, dude, what am I doing wrong? Or what did I do wrong? And that just brought us all closer together. Because I wasn't showing up with my past, right? If you show up with your past, that's your ego. That's not being present, right? And I wanted to be present. I didn't want to show up with my past. My past is the past. That has nothing to do with who I am now. And I just, in my accolades, that's not my identity. That's not my intellect, right? My intellect is my heart. And so I just wanted to show up with my heart, and, I didn't get ostracized for it, which is something that I would have done when I was their age.
That's a big statement.
Yeah, I think the movie kind of works a little bit with that, a little bit as well, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
Especially as you get older, and I'm 53 and still trying to hang in there, but it's tricky. You got to set some things aside.
Yeah, it's tricky. The hardest part for me was, like, I just told myself, like, look, there's no way that I was going to be able to get in shape to go do the Indus or the Stikine for that matter, unless I could get to a space to where I felt like it was second nature again. I wanted to get to that space to where, the whole, like, I think it's deceptive, you know, like if you're running something that you have wired, like it's like Grace going and doing the green, like it's me going and doing the South U, but I know every single position that my knee is in. I know everything, that every foot that I push on when I make moves at all the different levels. But my reactive kayaking is what I lost the most. And that's what took the longest to get back, where you're showing up and you're running something that you don't know and you're reactively successfully navigating without a hitch and making that second nature. And I think that a lot of people get they get confused as to like separating those two things. And my reactive kayaking was terrible. And my memory is terrible. You know, I've never really been great at memorizing runs in general. I always use that. I always used to say I used to use it as an advantage a lot of times, because I always felt like reactive kayaking was so important, because I always felt like, you know, plan A is great, but when you're falling apart in plan B, that's terrible, right? So you want to be able to take plan A and react as well as you are in plan A is with plan B and plan C. And a lot of people, they let their ego and their intellect get in the way there, and that you know, it becomes deceptive. And I was hyper aware of that when I got back in a kayak. I knew that I needed to make it second nature.
How'd you get it back?
I just swam a lot. I sat behind Annual. I sat behind Russ. I sat behind, you know, I just started kayaking with kids that were doing it every single day that were half my age, you know? And that's basically, you know, I you know, just spent 2 weeks in Leavenworth on the Tom Water with Willie, and you know, paddled with Dane for several days. Tyler came up, paddled with him, and paddled with Evan for 2 weeks, and it's just such a different vibe when you can sit behind the kids and just absorb. And
the truth is that he just got an OG, and that was it.
Yeah, that's it.
So when I came out to the Gold like 2 years ago, like, the first day in the water, like second day in the water, I was paddling with like Isaac Levinson and Tyler Brott and Geltman, and I was like, fuck. You know, I kind of tantrum. I just threw like a tantrum. You know what I mean? And I'm like, fuck kayaking. I'm fucking done. You know? And it took me like 2 years before I sort of like, you know, really just hating myself that I wasn't kayak. Because I feel like I'm what else do I have? You know, I mean, besides, of course, my family and business. But other than that, my personality has been driven around kayaking. You know, I mean, I've kayaked since I was 9 years old.
It's your identity.
It really is, you know.
Yeah.
And the people I hang out with are kayakers. And I'm just sitting there staring at the floor where they're talking about kayaking, you know what I mean? And that was me. And, you know, finally I'm like, fuck it, I got to figure this out, you know? And so I just started following people, which I would never do, you know? So I started running a little white. I'd be like on Max Blackburn's ass, like 4 inches off his stern, just watching every single thing he did. And as humiliating as it was, and for me it really was, I was like, I have to eat crow and do this, you know? And thankfully I feel like I got an OG finally. And, and like kid came back from world class, and he was like, we're gonna go kayaking, and I'm like, all right, let's do it. And so that's been a huge part as well. But what Grace said is true earlier, though. You know, like I look at the people I used to paddle with 20 years ago, and I'm like the last guy standing. You know, there's like 2 of us, you know, or 3 of us.
Willie's still out there sending it. He's awesome. I love following that guy down the river so much, and so grateful that he's still in a kayak. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's just not many of us left, you know. And I'm so I mean, I feel like I got such an incredible second chance, you know, especially with my tumor and you know, everything that went on with that, and just my relationship with the river is so it's so amazing. It's so much better at this point in my life.
And do you think your cancer has changed? I mean, is that just incidental, or has that been changing the direction of your paddling?
You know, don't want to upset anybody by this, but I've said this openly multiple times. I got to a point. I mean, you can imagine if you've got like an egg or a baseball in your head, how that can mess with just your thoughts and your being as a whole, and I think my tumor was in full swing probably just after the Sangpo is when they're thinking that it started. And so, I would never blame anything on it, but I definitely feel like it propelled me to a place to where I could actually, once I realized that my tumor was not a weakness and that my fight with my tumor was a strength, right? That changed my perspective on everything, because up until that point, my ego and my intellect and the idea that I could control everything had been wiped away in one swing. It was like, if I can't control this thing in my head, what do I actually have control of? I've got control of nothing. I've never had control of anything. And then I looked at the river and I was like, the only thing I ever had respect for was the river, because it was this thing that was wild and changing and free flowing. And it was the only place that I felt at peace. It's the thing that saved my life. I was on a trajectory as a kid that was not good. And every time something became difficult or hard, I would just run to the river. And once I was able to take that out of the way, once I had awareness of my ego and my intellect, and I was able to actually ask for help, that changed everything for me. It changed my trajectory with everything. I just stopped controlling. I would just show up. I would give it 100%. If it didn't work out, so be it. And I still have a brain tumor, and it's still growing. And no matter how hard I try to fight it, and I'm trying pretty fucking hard, it doesn't mean that it's going to go away. So, why would I try to control anything at this point in my life?
Yeah, that's a perspective. It's a perspective shift. I mean, there's nothing you can go on. Oh God, I want to get into the conversation that we had when we first talked about your tumor and when all of that stuff happened. A lot of it is covered in the film, so I don't want to get too in depth on it. That's a can of worms. It's hard to get into without talking too much about it. But real quick, how did you come to go to the doctor and find out that this all happened? Like, how did you know that you had this thing going on? I started getting, I thought I had this sinus infection. And I went down and I can tell this story because it's not really in the film, but I went down to this herbal shop and I got some Chinese herbs to try to help with the congestion. And I ended up taking them, and like 3 hours later, I end up getting this like triple vision, double vision headache. And I kind of like, not completely black out, but I kind of have this like crazy migraine headache. And I took it.
What year was this? What's time?
This is 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, 14. Yeah, because I think I had the surgery February 3rd, 2015. So this is December. This is Christmas Day 14.
Right.
This happens. 6 days later, New Year's, go out, have dinner with my family, come back. I'm getting ready to go out. and I get another headache, and I have a triple vision knockout headache where I woke up on the ground. And I was like, that's crazy. That's super weird. And 2 days later, I went in and saw the doctor, and he's like, we need to take a picture. And I wasn't halfway home, and he told me to turn around and come back.
And his thing was like, we got to talk, or you need to get this taken care of right away, or?
No. Oh yeah. It went straight into, he put me in touch, and this is a crazy story, actually, man. Like, I instantly go into mode of like, okay, I got to find the best neurosurgeon in the world. So I basically go and find the two guys that have done the procedure, that invented the procedure. One guy was out of UCSF, and the other guy was at Johns Hopkins. And I was with Kaiser Permanente, which is like HMO healthcare program. It wasn't like, and they had just developed a new neuro department. And I was like, I'm going to walk into this meeting with this neuro guy, and I'm going to ask for a transfer to UCSF because I've already got the doctor that I want to go with. And I get the doctor's name that I'm going to go see, this guy named Dr. Brian Gian. And I do a little bit of research, and I see that he had done his internship at UCSF in San Francisco. I was like, oh, that's interesting, And so, but for me to go to SF, I needed his signature to get pushed because I had a feeling that they weren't going to be able to do the procedure. I walk into this room, and he starts telling me how he's going to pull this thing out of my head. And I was just like, wait a minute, we need to have a talk about who you are and what you are. And so I asked him, I was like, where are you trained, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, I've worked under McDermott at UCSF in San Francisco. He's the guy that invented the procedure. He had been doing all of his surgeries for the last 3 years. And Kaiser had basically caught wind of him and stole him out of UCSF to set up a program in Sacramento. And this guy was 37 years old. He was younger than I was. He basically had a dream when he was 7 that he was going to be a neurosurgeon, went straight through. He was like the Doogie Howser of neuro. And he turned around and he asked me, he's like, hey, what about you? What do you do? And I said, yeah, I'm a washed up professional athlete gone filmmaker. And he's like, you're a kayaker, right? And hang on one second here. Sorry.
The dog was forcibly ejected from the interview.
My girlfriend's dog just came, and he's like, I was like, yeah, I'm a washed up professional kayaker, or washed up professional kayaker gone filmmaker, or I said washed up professional athlete gone filmmaker. And he's like, you're a kayaker, right? And I was like, yeah, how do you know that? And he's like, do you know Jason Hale? And I was like,
oh God.
How the fuck do you know Jason Hale? And he was like, well, he's my neuro nurse in San Francisco for the last 4 years. And I was like, hold please. And I walked out the door and I called Hale. And I was like, Hale, I got to ask you something. And he's like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm at a neurosurgeon's office right now. And I'm at this guy, Dr. Brian Gian's office, and he's like, what the fuck are you doing in that office? And I was like, but I got to bring to him. And he's like, he's your guy. I was like, oh my God. And then that was it, man. I was like, all right, kid, let's get it on. And and so it's so funny, man. I go into the surgery, and Willie and Johnny are there with me. My family's with me. I open up the doors. I walk in. And the nurse says, okay, this is kisses and goodbyes. I go in. I sit on the gurney. I'm hanging out. And Dr. Gian comes in, and he I had been sitting there for like an hour, which is like the longest hour of my life. And he's like, are you ready? And I was like, what do you mean? Am I ready? I was like, are you ready? You smoked a little weed last night, dog? You drink a little bit? Like, come on, you could tell me. It's okay, bud. And he started dying because he's not, I mean, these guys are used to playing God. Everyone's just like, yes, sir, no, sir. And all of a sudden I'm asking if he had a good night's sleep or if he had a little too much to drink last night.
You sleep at Days Inn or whatever.
Oh man, it was we're still super, super close. He's actually coming to the film premiere in Auburn on August 7th. He's going to come up with his wife and stuff, and we still communicate and are really close and stuff like that. I'm so grateful for him. And yeah, they pulled out about 70-75%, and the other 25-30% is wrapped around my right carotid artery, which is not really.
You need that, right? The carotid artery.
It's important.
Yeah. All right, just making sure.
That's a trick. People have always said, like, well, what are you worried? What scares you? And I was like, I'm not afraid. Like, I've never been afraid of going to the other side.
I mean, first of all, you were on the Indus with a Snapdragon skirt. No disrespect to Snapdragon, but that's
Jesus! Well, I'm editing that out.
I fully respect what you're saying. I love Rich. Don't get me wrong.
I just didn't.
John was in like rapt silence watching.
Oh my god!
And
I was like,
that comes up with like Snapdragon.
Like, oh dear.
I actually kind of agree with that. Yeah.
I thought, Rush, you're the one that told me to buy that Snapdragon.
Oh heck no, dude! I'm IR skirts for.
Wait.
I don't know how I ended up with that. I instantly, well, apparently I ended up, I think some of the kids started making fun of me, or something happened. I swam out of that thing or something, and then I ended up.
I'll give you a hard time.
You're like, yeah, I'll give you.
Makes a fine product.
You were like, yeah, I'd love to give you a spray skirt, man, but you got to come do this podcast. And I was like, all right, deal.
That's how we got him on? That's how we got him on.
By the way, I'm due for a new spray skirt.
I'm also really due for a new skirt right now.
Well, you and the rest of the planet. It's been a sticky wicket getting product out of Asia right now. I don't know if you guys have heard.
Yeah.
But
we heard something about that.
Let us know. Write us an email. We'll get it figured out.
Damn. So... what a transition that is. So, like, can we talk about getting, I mean, how much can we let it, can we talk about where the film is going to be distributed and kind of get into how that took place? Is this public knowledge?
Rush. I think Rush is the man for this one.
How do we do this, Rush?
Yeah. I can't mention exactly where it's going to be, but I can say that it'll be available like pretty much everywhere. Pretty soon, actually. Yeah, in the next month or two, you'll be able to get it on pretty much every platform out there. And the distribution was, is a long journey. And as Scott kind of mentioned earlier, we did get a lot of feedback on this film, and that was challenging at times because I think that the film that I kind of originally made almost 2 years ago, was really not quite the film that was going to sort of be able to break into a more kind of mainstream market. And that's kind of always been the goal, is to for me anyway, as a filmmaker, I guess like I've made a lot of kayak porn flicks, and those are awesome and have been really fun. But I think since doing, Chasing Niagara, my last project, the goal was to do something else that was going to be sort of in that same, kind of vein, I guess. And so, it took a lot of different cuts and re-edits to get it to a point where we actually had a distributor that was interested in kind of putting it out there to the world. So you can expect it here pretty quick. We're going to do a couple small screenings, just like local screenings, one here in Hood River on the 21st of August, and then one down in Auburn on the 7th of August. So if you're around, you can reserve the tickets for the Auburn one now. It's actually getting pretty close to, so over half the tickets have been sold. So that one will sell out, and the Hood River one will too, probably. So people should come on out if they're in those communities for sure.
But we can't talk about where it's going to be distributed yet.
Unfortunately, not yet. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I had a lot of questions to dig down on that one, but I'll hold those to the next time.
Yeah. It's contractually no, but what I can say is that it's going to be announced really soon where it's going to be. So, yep.
Man, dude. Well, I mean, I love the movie. I mean, it's hard for me, I know a lot of the characters and, but I will say this. I'm always going to like the film when like all your friends and acquaintances are in it. You're never going to not like it. But compliments to you, Rush, and the editing team and the people who wrote the story. It was very easy to follow and connected. And that is the hardest part of making a film, in my opinion, is being able to seamlessly keep the viewer without them questioning, wait, now what happened there? And whatever. And so it was just like super good the whole way through. I watched it with my wife. She loved it. And she's not a kayaker. So.
Thanks, man. That means a lot, especially coming from you guys. I'm a big fan of all your work
so
too,
much,
man.
But I'm so grateful, especially considering how much time and effort you have behind the computer yourself, bud. So grateful for words, man.
Yeah. And I will also say, Grace, too, you've always been very supportive. All the way back to the De La Verne days and all that, but, you guys were always helping me out with stuff, and Scott, too, so this is all kind of everything going out in the River Runners trickled down from the folks who kind of came before. So shout out to you guys for supporting the youths back in the day,
Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's kind of still going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like whatever. Did we lose Lewis? Wait, there he is. He's back. He's back. I don't know, guys. We're like 2 hours and 10 minutes in here. I could probably go in to deeper detail about some various things. I got a whole list of things here, but I don't know. Is there anything else you guys would like to jump in and cover? Or, Lewis, well, I feel like I've talked too much already on this show. So.
No, I think you just need to go out and watch the movie. I think if you listen to this interview and you see the depth of work and stuff that Scott's done, this should whet your interest into watching the movie for sure. And like I said, I think it's to the movie's credit it's not a kayaking movie for sure. Speaking as a kayaker, I just enjoyed it that much more because of that. So.
And you guys are, I think you guys are being a little modest and downplaying the whitewater a little bit because like there is some sick paddling in there.
Shit
for
running in there.
Yeah,
for sure. And then, honestly, we sat around after the movie for like an hour discussing it. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Trying to figure out like, what we made of it, and a lot of that had to do with people. We know some of the people in there, but still, it's just an interesting movie for sure. Because it made me think about like what do you have to do and be to be a great athlete? You know what I mean? And what kind of person is that? And what happens as that person gets older and experiences hardships? that was definitely one of the themes I was really paying attention to.
Yeah, and also like how much of that is like truly essential, right? It's like there are
the edge. You're talking about the personality edge.
Yeah, there's certainly like that there are people out there, like if you watch like The Last Dance, like the Michael Jordan documentary, and like he's like pretty hard on people, and like Kobe Bryant had that reputation, and then it's like like that certainly seems like you could put Scott just in the movie at least you could sort of like put your character in that mold a bit, but it seems like as the story unfurls, there's maybe a little bit of an examination of like how much of that is essential. Is that fair?
I think so for sure. I think that is a path towards excellence, and there's plenty of examples of athletes that excel by being that way. But I'm also a firm believer that there is another way. It doesn't always have to be like that. And I think that's definitely, I don't know. I think just even looking at the footage and looking at like there's a very genuine transformation going on, throughout the film and the story. And I think it's cool to see Scott arrive at that destination, because I feel like a lot of other athletes, like, I don't know, like there isn't always the edge. There's not always this sort of this drive that has to be there to like make it I don't know. I guess there's another way to arrive at excellence, and I think that you can be empathetic and kind towards your team and everything. But at the end of the day, like, we are dealing with extremely dangerous, hazardous conditions where you do have to kind of compartmentalize fear, and you do have to shut off certain emotions so as to, get through something that's life-threatening. So I think that when that trickles into your day-to-day life and your sort of normal routine, that's when it becomes, can be pretty detrimental to your health.
But Scott, do you feel like, you were, as you just described, you were on a tear there. Doing stuff on such a pace and such a scale. Do you think, I almost have to believe you have to have a certain amount of self, you just have to have a ridiculous amount of confidence and a bit of ruthlessness to get that accomplished. Because if you're going to get bogged down with other people's problems, it's just not going to happen sometimes.
Yeah, it's 100%. It was everything that Russ, said. I surrounded myself with like-minded people, because if you showed instability on the river, it was a threat to the safety of the expedition. And as Rush alluded to, I couldn't compartmentalize that behavior. I was taking that behavior and pushing it through everything else in my life. So if my girlfriend was showing emotional instability, I'd just be like, "What are you crying about? Like,
time to run the
down river. Like, stop crying." And that doesn't work. You know what I mean? And then if you're like dealing with like normal people, it doesn't work. But it works really well on the river. And then if you're like alpha, and then you surround yourself with a bunch of like-minded people, it propels. And that's exactly what I did. And the lack of awareness is the inability to separate those things. And I can now show up on the river and compartmentalize that behavior that I need to have on the river, and then show up in my regular life and be a genuine person and not drag those patterns that I used. And it's tricky, because when I had when I had zero awareness around those behaviors, I was being reinforced with accolades. And when you're getting reinforced with accolades on the behavior, you become delusional almost to a certain degree as to like what your ego is and what your identity is and what your intellect is. And it wasn't until I learned what and had awareness around those things and then able to separate that I was able to actually like let go of that and not put value in that and put value in presence and showing up in the moment, because that's the most important thing that you can do for anyone, with your kids, with your partner, with your friends. And when you show up on the river, boom, you slide back in. You're an actor at that point. You slide back into the persona that you developed. And for me, it was natural, because as a kid, I was in fight or flight my entire life. I grew up in tough neighborhoods. I was in fights all the time. I was in a very fight or flight upbringing. And I was on a trajectory. A huge percentage of my friends that I grew up with are in prison or are down the darkest of darkest roads. And, the river was my escape. And then all of a sudden, like, if I'm like, instead of getting in trouble or doing illegal shit, I'm running super hard whitewater, then that was, for me, it was such a different vehicle, for me to get out from doing this other stuff. And I just, the more accolades I got, the bigger everything else got, and the more unapproachable I became. Every room that I walked into, I just felt like I was having the life sucked out of me, and I just wanted to be on the river. Anytime anything became complicated, I would just run to the river. It was my escape. That was great. But what happens when the river gets taken away? And I never planned for that. I always said, you can take everything away from me, but you can't take the river away from me. I'll just go fuck off on the river. And then when the river got taken away, I had nothing. And so then it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I didn't know how to ask for help. And that's a scary place to be. And then you have something where I knew something was wrong, but I went and saw doctors and stuff, but I didn't know how to, nothing, from the time that I stepped out of the kayak to the time I was diagnosed, oh my God, it was like 6 years. And then, they say, one of the scariest things, right? When you're in prison, one of the things that they do when you act out is they put you in the hole, right? They isolate you, right? One of the darkest things that you can do to yourself is self-inflicted isolation, right? When you put that on yourself and you can see, feel, go, and do anything that you want, but you can't get out of bed. And so many people that are dealing with cancer, that look at cancer or tumors or mental illness as weakness, they don't know how to ask for help. Many friends of mine that have been diagnosed that come to me now that I've let go and are telling me their personal journey with it, but are in the same breath telling me, don't tell anyone what's going on here. And especially with men, this is something that came up with First Ascent. This is one of the things that Brad and I, when we reconnected down in South America a few years ago, he approached me, because I told Brad what was going on. This is Brad Ludden. And he was like, hey, I want to talk to you about something. He's like, 75% of our applicants, something like that, 75 or 80% of our applicants are female. And I was like, I know why. And, this is like what First Ascent does that the medical community doesn't do, is that they diagnose, they treat, and then they kick you to the curb. And there's nothing left on the back end. Sure, there might be a little PT involved, but there's no emotional support at all. And that's what's so amazing about First Ascent, is that it pulls people into the outdoors, and it brings people that are dealing with similar situations, and it allows you to openly have conversation about this place that you're in. And in my case, when I was diagnosed, and during that period of time, I was by myself. I was on my own. I mean, I had people coming and going a little bit, but I was on my own, and I didn't want help, and I didn't know how to ask for help. And so I just, helped, with Brad and with everyone, just like explaining, like, this is something that I wanted to articulate and explain to where everyone understood that they're not alone and that I'm not alone. And I think a pivotal moment too for Rush and I was we had gone. I'll give me 1 second, John. And I had got invited to speak at First Ascent, and I hadn't spoke and told my story publicly from like a top to bottom. And I wrote this whole thing out. I did like 20-something pages. The night before, we're sitting in the hotel room, and I read it to Rush. And Rush looks over at me, and he's like, "You're not going to fucking read that." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to read it, but I'm scared to like let it go." And so the next morning I woke up and I took an ice bath, And then I went back to the room, I folded the thing up, and I threw it in my bag. And I went up, and I basically got up in front of 200 people at First Ascent, and I told my story. And the whole room cried. Like, a third of the way, like, they cried. Like, it was crazy, the response that we got. And I think, I can't speak for Rush, but it was a really powerful moment. And that helped me surrender more. That even helped me open up more. Like, if this film helps a couple people, then, oh my God, job done. You know, like, so grateful to even have the opportunity to be in the position that I'm in, to share what I have to share.
Well said. I think one thing, big takeaway for me from the film was just that shift in perspective. I mean, no matter how savage the river is, you can always eddy out. You can always reassess. You can stop. But when you found out you had brain cancer, there was no stopping. You know what I mean? Like, you were submitted to the flow. I don't know. Like, that really resonated. Was that perspective shift? I was like, man, that's a perspective that is hard to grasp. You know, it's a perspective that's hard.
Yeah,
to grasp.
I mean, it took a DUI, it took brain cancer, it took a chick tricking me into getting help. You know, it took so much for me to get to this place to where I actually was able to get help, and then just the way that it unfolded, it's not, it couldn't be scripted, you know, like, it's just, I just feel so grateful and so lucky that I was able to be here, and then to be able to share and let go and surrender. I mean, that's ultimately, like, what I've had to do is just surrender, like, no control of anything. And I'm still battling a tumor. And if, like, there is no conquering, there is no, you know, as I say in the film, I'm not trying to pave roads. I'm just trying to stay on the road. And that's, you know, yeah.
That's profound. I mean, that's that will be a remembered. You know, I don't want to talk too much about the film, but that'll be a remembered statement right there. You coming to the green race this year?
Oh man, EG's trying to talk me into coming to the Southeast for like 2 or 3 weeks in September. So you might see me, bud.
Yeah, you
I
should
don't
come
know
down.
about the green race, but I hear it's the highest consistent runnable whitewater in the world, anywhere in the world these days. You guys are the only one that are getting any weather. We're not getting anything out here. Jeez,
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Well, you gotta get you out there for a Little White race too, Grace.
Yeah, well,
I think
you need to build a dam and put some water in the river, bro.
I flew to DC to visit my parents. We flew in a couple of days ago, and we were driving from the airport, and it started raining. And my kid and I both rolled on the windows and just put our hand out the window and touched the rain. Like, what are you doing? Like, you don't understand, man. There's some shit coming out of the sky right now. Did you see that?
So true.
Oh man, I would be scared to run a longboat down the green. Oh my God, I'd be kind of scared. I would probably like have to practice that a lot. I haven't been in a longboat. I got a first generation Diablo from Sierra Outdoor Center the other day, and I raced that on the South Feather, or the North Feather actually, and oh my God, man, that thing steers like a train. It's so there's so low volume. I cannot believe how much shit I ran in that boat.
You ran a Scott's drop in a Diablo, right?
Oh yes,
loaded.
Yes.
Yeah,
for
first
sure.
generation Diablo, loaded.
I'll never forget it.
I'll sign that one up for anyone that wants to sign up and do that one. Let me know. I'd love to go and watch.
Dude, the green flows way easier than you think in a longboat, man. It really does.
Yeah, it's super chill. Nothing can go wrong out there. Nothing can go wrong.
Rush is giving me all the influence in all the encouragement and influence in the world watching his GoPro lines the last It's been amazing.
I think I'm going to shut down this interview here. Big thank you to Scott. Big thank you to Rush. You guys for coming on. And, typically we go into some listener mail and some other stuff here before we get into rants and raves. But if you would like to go ahead and stick with us here on the show, we usually shut down with some rants or raves, something you're stoked about or not so fired up about. You guys interested in sticking around, or you want to bugger off?
We've been here for 2 hours and 2.5 hours. Why not stick it out for a few more minutes, bud?
All right. Well, I'm going to lead us off here. I'm going to rant. I'm going to rant about the smoke in my air right now from the forest fires in Oregon and California. So if you guys could just dampen that shit down a little bit, just so it's not smoky here. That's going to be my rant right there. So it's crazy, dude. I've never seen this. Like, it's like hazy here. I mean, like, you go up on top of the hill, dude, and it looks like you're in frickin' downtown LA. It's nuts. So
yeah,
appreciate that, boys.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Gelman, what do you got? Bring the heat.
All right.
Dig deep.
I got a solid old man rant here that I've been really trying to suppress, but I'm breaking it out.
All right. I love it.
I'm the ironic mullet.
You're over
I'm
it.
over it. It's like looking like terrible, just like as a joke. It's like it's funny, but like you still look terrible.
You are showing your age, dude.
Like the ironic mullet. It's I don't know. It was kind of funny a while ago, but like it's run its course. Like, get a haircut.
I'm not sure if it's a rant or a rave, but I could phrase it as a rant, I suppose. You don't need a bed shaft unless there's something seriously wrong with you, like a medical condition in your wrist. Having used a bed shaft just out of habit for years, I finally picked up a straight shaft. I'm like, what the fuck was I doing?
Hey, I've been saying that for a long
Shogun
time.
too. Just get a Shogun. I understand the Dodge is fine and great, but the Shogun's a better paddle. Well,
I'm right there with you, but I can't do bench shaft. I try it, and every time I end up injured using those things, and I went back to the straight shaft, and
yeah,
right.
It's lighter. It paddles longer. If you want to lay treats, you need a straight shaft. Laying treats in a bed shaft is almost a non-starter.
I like it for freestyle. I think for freestyle, it's kind of the jam.
And I also would say, Scott, your 30-degree offset's a bit disappointing. And I was tempted to have Grace end the interview right there, but I'm glad we pushed through.
Oh man! So what are you at? Are you at
45?
What's wrong with
60.
You're at 60.
Yeah, you cannot. When you punch through, you just can't paddle vertically unless it's 60 degrees. And you can't really feather a bow draw unless you're 60 degrees.
Trouble punching through holes.
What's that?
Dane Jackson's at 30 degrees. He doesn't have any trouble punching.
Dane Jackson's not an example for anything. He can paddle like
just
just want to paddle like this. You know what I'm saying? That's 30 degrees down here.
I mean, it's okay if you can't punch a hole. At least I can roll up after I get rolled up.
If you need a 30-degree to roll in the second part of Scott's drop, then more power to you. You're okay with that.
I do, but I need every little thing I can get. I take every advantage that I can get these days, man. I have no shame in that game.
I think my rant is Dane Jackson, actually. Like,
oh, good.
Thank God.
This is the only thing you do remember about this whole show, by the way.
It's kind of like it's kind of annoying. It's like not that. It's not that amazing, you know. Like it's too amazing. It's too good. It's like too refined, too crisp. Like, he just kind of like nails everything. It's like I don't know.
It's annoying.
It's annoying.
We're tuned out at this
It's
point.
true. It's like there are those like athletes who are just like such naturals that you just like can't even like identify with them. You know, it's like watching like Brandon Semenuk ride a bike or something. You're just like, this is a video game. This is not reality.
It's like the new Eminem for me. Like I really respect him a lot, but it's too perfect. It's like give me some flaws somewhere, dude. Like I know you beat her. You gotta beat her more than you let on, you know? Like somewhere.
People ask us if we're going to like if we would sponsor Dane, as if he would ask us. And I'm like, he's just too good. You know, he's not doing your gear any credit. He's just too fucking good.
Right?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter what he's paddling with.
All right, I'm gonna do a rant. I hope I can articulate this the right way, but I'm gonna do a rant to all the companies that allocate marketing money to Instagram models. It absolutely drives me bananas. I swear every penny that's spent to an Instagram influencer versus a real athlete should be hung.
Geltman, you're off the team.
Marketing directors out there that are not allocating funds to the people that are out there trying to live the dream, they can tie a weight to their neck and go jump in a lake.
That's a solid rant.
My boss Adam told me that he was out at Great Falls the other day, and there were these like steakhead guys down there who had brought like full like universal bars like down to the edge of the river so they could like take pictures of themselves like doing squats. Like
Yeah.
It's just insane. I just am so God. I just want the kids to live the dream like we did. I want to see them get budgets, and I just struggle when people are allocating to selfies. That's savage, man. Savage. Such bullshit.
Dude, I think everyone on this panel right here is in full agreement with that.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir there.
Yeah. I mean, I do make some money off of influencer campaigns.
Oh,
so,
Jesus.
yeah.
There we go,
Hey,
Rush.
Rush, at least you're a real athlete. I mean, that's the difference. At least you're
it's
a
all-
real
it's all
athlete. It's the
smoking-
people that
it's all
aren't
smoke and mirrors.
athletes that are just getting, these insane money grabs and stealing money from the kids that really deserve it. It's not
Tyler's
not
more than
fair.
a pretty face, too. You know, there's more to him than that, Rush.
Hey, I don't care what they look like as long as they're doing something cool. Support
I
that.
mean, but Russia's got a great smile, dude. I would fucking throw some
He
coins on his
does.
Instagram. Shit.
He does. He's the full package deal. That kid.
I'm getting old, man. I'm getting too old.
Whole 36, huh, bud?
36,
Yeah, right.
man. 36. No.
I go paddle with the old man group, and they're all like 12 years younger than me. And I'm like...
Yeah. Know that.
Well, 3 hours deep. Thank you for listening to Hammer Factor episode 83. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Rush.
Thank you,
And,
guys.
Yeah, check out the River Runner. Where can we learn more about the if someone wants to? What's the next step for someone
Post a
who's
trailer
interested?
or a website or a flyer.
Yeah, where do we
or a
go? Where do we
poster,
go?
We'll
What
let
do
you
we
know.
do?
Yeah, you can just follow us on Instagram. I'm working on a website. I'm a little behind on some stuff, but actually, seriously, social media is probably the best place to find out anything about it at this point.
Well, sick, dude. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. That was sick.
Heck yeah, boys.
All right, later.